Chapter 174. Isn't this the imperial prison? Wang Chong was even more surprised than the other party. He had been here for so long, but this was the first time he heard someone say that this wasn't the imperial prison. The palace of the previous dynasty's great sway is actually called the imperial prison. How ironic. However, it's not wrong to call it the imperial prison. The imperial prison has a total of 9 floors. This is the 10th floor, so let's call it the imperial prison. The man sneered. The great sway's palace. Wang Chong's heart skipped a beat. He raised his head and looked around in disbelief. He had been here for so long, but he never knew that this was the great sway's palace. The Tang dynasty replaced the previous Sui dynasty, and the Tang dynasty's palace was built on the ruins of the Great Sui's palace. Wang Chong knew all of this. However, Wang Chong didn't know that there was a complete Great Sui's palace under the palace. Senior, it's not that I don't believe you. It's just that if this isn't the imperial prison, why are these people locked up here? I can't sense whether this is the imperial prison, but can't they sense it? Wang Chong still had some doubts in his heart. Them. Are you talking about these prisoners who were sent here 10 days ago? These prisoners, as long as they're thrown into a cell, how can they tell whether this is the imperial prison or not? I was wondering why there was no one else on the 9th floor apart from me. Why are there suddenly so many people here? Now I understand. It's all because of you. These prisoners were transferred here because of you. Ah. That person's reply left Wang Chong flabbergasted. Wang Chong had always thought that these people had been here for a long time. And it had always been so. But from what the man said, these people were only transferred here temporarily. This was hard for Wang Chong to accept. But Wang Chong believed that the other party had no reason to lie to him about this. How is this possible? Wang Chong raised his head and muttered to himself. The truth that had suddenly emerged made Wang Chong feel an indescribable and huge drop in his heart. According to that person, the surrounding prisoners were actually transferred here at the last minute. Moreover, it seemed like they were transferred here because of him to form this temporary prison. This statement left Wang Chong dumbfounded. But this was not the only thing that left Wang Chong stunned. He had been here for many days now, and he had never seen anything like this before. It was only today that he found out that there were people imprisoned below him. More importantly, the last time he changed the fate of his family and unlocked the title of Destiny Struggler, he was only rewarded with 50 Destiny Energy. And this person's mere voice had actually alarmed the Stone of Destiny, causing it to give a reminder of the reward of 100 Destiny Energy. Wang Chong found it hard to imagine what kind of person could be so important. Let me ask you, how long have you known him? With this thought in mind, Wang Chong raised his head and pointed at another prisoner. Him? I don't know him. I was only transferred here 10 days ago, no, 1 month, no, 3 months, how long is it, how long has it been? The prisoner who was questioned was still very normal at first, but as time went on, his answers became more and more chaotic, until he seemed to be in a psychotic state. Seeing this, Wang Chong quickly stopped. The other prisoners looked as if they were not surprised at all. In the prison, it was so dark that it was impossible to sense the passage of time. Staying here for too long, it was very easy for one to go insane. This kind of thing could not be felt normally. But once there was a trigger, it would immediately act up. Wang Chong could only judge how much time had passed by observing the number of water droplets. Looks like he's right. Wang Chong thought to himself. Even though the other party's answers were all over the place, there was one thing he was sure of, and that was that these people had only been transferred here for a short period of time. However, because they had been locked up in the prison for a long time, they had long become numb, which was why they were oblivious to the changes in their surroundings. Senior, you just said that there are 9 levels in the prison, and I'm locked in the 10th. May I know which level you're on? Wang Chong asked tentatively. This person was too strange and mysterious. Me? Ha ha ha, if you're on the 10th level, then I'm on the 20th. The lowest level of the Great Sui Palace is me. The man laughed, but Wang Chong could hear a hint of sorrow and anger in his voice. Then why did you come here, senior? Wang Chong asked. The laughter stopped abruptly. In an instant, the entire underground was silent. Wang Chong waited for a long time, but there was no reply. It was as if everything was just an illusion to Wang Chong. Senior? Wang Chong frowned and asked tentatively. Young man, don't ask too many questions. Sometimes, knowing too much isn't necessarily a good thing. Aren't you going out soon? You can ask me again the next time you come here. I've never liked to take advantage of others, especially those of the younger generation. Just take this as the price for talking to you. Before Wang Chong could react, he felt the ground beneath him tremble. Then, a powerful force tore through the air. This energy pierced through the earth and slammed into Wang Chong's body like a thunderbolt. Wang Chong's little yin-yang art had originally encountered a bottleneck, and there was an acupoint that he couldn't open. However, under the effect of this force, it instantly opened up. Not only that, this powerful force didn't stop there. After opening that acupoint, boom boom boom, it helped Wang Chong open up the entire circulation of the little yin-yang art in his body. Then, it circulated once before disappearing without a trace. At the same time, the underground returned to its deathly stillness. That mysterious aura completely disappeared from Wang Chong's mind. Wang Chong sat there in a daze, his mind blank. He couldn't help but be stunned by the other party's power. This person had been locked up in the dungeon, but he still possessed such immense power. His yuan qi could pierce through the layers of the earth's crust and accurately strike his body. What shocked Wang Chong even more was that the little yin-yang art was derived from the great yin-yang heaven creation art, and had been passed down to him by the evil emperor. There were definitely not many people who knew about this secret art. Wang Chong didn't know if the other party had known about this secret art beforehand, or if the other party had observed him while he was cultivating the little yin-yang art in the dungeon and deduced the complete little yin-yang art. But no matter which one it was, they were both astonishing to Wang Chong. Senior. 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 Wang Chong tried calling out 3 times, but the ground was completely silent. There was no response at all. It was so quiet that it was as if nothing had happened. However, the surging yuan qi in his body clearly told Wang Chong that this wasn't an illusion. Who is this person? He's so powerful, but he's been locked up in the dungeon. And from the looks of it, he's been locked up for a very, very long time. Wang Chong couldn't help but think. Wang Chong had seen many things in his previous life, and he knew many experts. The evil emperor, So Young's son, Wang Chong knew all of them. But Wang Chong didn't know that there was such an expert locked up in the depths of the dungeon. And of all the experts he knew, there wasn't a single one who could match up to this person. Who is this person? Wang Chong mumbled to himself. This was the first time he felt something unexpected, and he was deeply curious about it. But no matter how confused Wang Chong was, no matter how curious he was, the mysterious existence beneath the ground had truly vanished. No matter how Wang Chong called out, there was no response. It was as if the existence had never existed in the first place. After trying a few times, Wang Chong could only give up. The little yin-yang art was cleared in one go, saving Wang Chong a lot of time and effort. Thus, Wang Chong decided to focus on consolidating his cultivation technique. Time flew by, and 3 months passed in the blink of an eye. Before he knew it, it was finally time for Wang Chong to leave the dungeon. Congratulations, user, for altering the consort Taizhen incident and altering the fate of the King of Song. Mission completion rate, 30%. Reward, 20 destiny energy. Congratulations, user, for altering the regional commander's incident and altering the fate of the empire. Mission completion rate, 30%. Reward, 30 destiny energy. Almost at the same time that the last day arrived, the Stone of Destiny's familiar voice sounded in his ears. At the same time, two messages appeared in Wang Cheng's mind. Wang Cheng was stunned, and then his heart was filled with joy. 50 destiny energy. I actually obtained 50 destiny energy. Wang Cheng was both surprised and excited. This harvest was simply too bountiful. It had far exceeded Wang Cheng's expectations. Previously, Wang Cheng had altered the fate of his entire clan, and indirectly, he had also altered the fate of the King of Song. Adding on the special title that came with activating the Destiny Struggler title, he had only obtained 50 destiny energy in total after doing so many things. But this time, he had only completed 30% of the mission, and he had already obtained 50 destiny energy. If he completed everything at 100%, wouldn't he be able to obtain more than 150 destiny energy? This made Wang Cheng even more certain of his judgment. It seems that changing the fate of the empire is far more rewarding than changing one's own fate. Wang Cheng thought to himself. The only regret was that in the Consort Taizhen incident, Consort Taizhen still walked together with the Holy Emperor. This was a historical event that had not changed. And in the end, the regional commander's incident was still carried out. Wang Cheng had only removed the utilizing the Hu strategy. Otherwise, the reward he would have received would have been even greater. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, Wang Cheng saw several prison guards, led by Zhou Xing, walking toward him. Opening the cell door, before Wang Cheng could say anything, one of the prison guards walked up to Wang Cheng and pressed on the back of his head. Here you go again. Chapter 175. Wang Cheng was jolted awake by a tsunami of cheers. As he slowly regained consciousness, there were only a few figures before him. The cheers came from the distant palace walls. Standing before him was the warden of the imperial prison, Zhou Xing, and a few other prison guards. They were bowing respectfully as they stood before him. One of the prison guards seemed especially nervous. With a single glance, Wang Cheng recognized that it was this prison guard who had knocked him out. Wang Gongzi, pardon my offense. I have no choice but to comply with the decree of the emperor. I hope that Gongzi can forgive me. Zhou Xing bowed, his posture extremely humble, and his tone was extremely courteous. Ever since the eunuch from the Sky Palace came, Zhou Xing knew that the young man before him wasn't an existence that he could afford to offend. Lord Zhou, you're being too polite. Wang Cheng chuckled and didn't argue with him. Right, can I leave now? Of course you can. Zhou Xing hurriedly stepped to the side, opening up a path for Wang Cheng. At this moment, he couldn't wait for Wang Cheng to leave. Even though the imperial prison dared to lock up anyone, this person definitely didn't belong here. Wang Cheng chuckled. With a flick of his sleeves, he passed through the crowd and continued on his way. Not too far away, a carriage was already prepared. This was Zhou Xing's arrangement. Wang Cheng dived into the carriage, and it rumbled forward. As he passed through the palace alleys, Wang Cheng could sense that many people were observing him, both in the light and in the shadows. The regional commander's incident didn't just attract the attention of the officials in the royal court. Even the imperial army was within their sights as well. Not to mention, Wang Cheng was the creator of the Wuxia steel. The closer he got to the palace gates, the louder the cheers Wang Cheng heard became. Wave after wave of cheers reverberated through the air. Finally, the carriage arrived at the palace gates and stopped. Wang Cheng. Chenger. As soon as Wang Cheng got out of the car, he heard a burst of joyful cheers. Turning his head, Wang Cheng saw two familiar figures striding toward him from more than 50 meters away from the palace gate. Commander Zhao. Uncle. Wang Cheng's eyes lit up as he immediately recognized it. Needless to say, Zhao Fengchen was an old acquaintance of his from the Bluebottle Pavilion. As for his uncle, Wang Chong, he wasn't surprised at all. Uncle and Zhao Fengchen were both members of the Imperial Army, and the Imperial Guards of the Royal Palace weren't allowed to enter or stay for long. However, Uncle, Zhao Fengchen, and the others were different. The forbidden area of the Imperial Palace was their territory to begin with. Haha, boy, you finally came out. Chonger, we've waited for a long time. The two of them strode forward and hugged Wang Chong tightly. Hey, let go. You two are too strong. I'm going to be strangled to death. Haha, this little bit of strength is nothing. I haven't even used my full strength. The two of them laughed heartily. Even though Wang Chong's neck was red from being strangled, he felt warmth in his heart. This was the feeling of kinship. It had been 3 months, and he was finally released from the Imperial prison. I wanted to invite you to the Imperial Army for a chat. However, it seems like that won't be possible. There are still people waiting for you outside. Hurry up and go out. Zhu Yan, your big uncle, and the others are waiting outside. The two of them didn't take up too much of Wang Chong's time. They patted his shoulders and led him out of the palace gate. No one else was allowed to enter. After passing through the heavy palace gate, a ray of sunlight shone in from the outside. At the moment when Wang Chong appeared outside the palace gate. Boom! An earth-shattering cheer suddenly sounded. This cheer was several times louder than what Wang Chong had heard in the royal palace. Wang Chong. Chong Gongzi is out. Chonger. Look! It's Wang Gongzi. Outside the royal palace, the crowd was in jubilation. Walking out of the palace gate, Wang Chong was still a little unaccustomed to the dazzling sunlight. By the time he got used to it and slowly opened his eyes, Wang Chong was dumbfounded by the sight of the sea of people before him. He didn't realize it when he was in the royal palace, but now that he was out, Wang Chong realized how many people had gathered outside. Looking out from the palace gate and into the distance, the crowd was densely packed. As far as the eye could see, there were people everywhere. Even the houses and trees on the sides of the street were packed with people, all of them looking in his direction with jubilation in their eyes. At a glance, it was hard to tell how many tens of thousands of people there were. Wang Chong. Wang Chong. Wang Chong. Wang Chong. In just a few seconds, the cheers of Wang Chong resounded from all directions. When tens of thousands of people wholeheartedly supported a person and shouted his name, it was an extremely majestic sight. Wang Chong stood at the palace gate in a daze, his entire body frozen. He had heard the cheers outside the royal palace, but he had no idea that so many people would come to welcome him on the day of his release. Those smiles were sincere and joyful, without any impurities. There were nobles, commoners, wealthy merchants, impoverished clans, and even a few profligate scions. At this moment, everyone was cheering for him from the bottom of their hearts. Many of these people had probably never seen or heard of him before. But on the day of his release, they had all gathered together to celebrate and cheer for him. This was the first time in his life that Wang Chong had received the cheers and support of so many people. Standing under the sunlight, Wang Chong felt a warmth in his heart. This was the Central Plains, this was the empire of the Tang dynasty. As long as one did the right thing, the people would support one. Whether it was a wealthy merchant or impoverished clans, the scions of nobility or the commoners, even the profligate scions, they would all wholeheartedly support one. Everyone had a scale in their hearts, and even the profligate scions would be able to distinguish right from wrong. Although he had been sentenced to 3 months of imprisonment and had spent 3 months in the imperial prison, at this moment, Wang Chong felt that it was all worth it. Enjoy all of this. Today, almost everyone in the capital, be it the nobles, the ministers, or the generals of the army, had come. This is a festival that belongs to you. Chonger, Big Uncle is happy for you. A familiar voice sounded in his ear. Dressed in court robes, big Uncle Wang Zhen strode over and patted Wang Chong's shoulder, his heart brimming with pride. Although Wang Chong was not his son, at this moment, he felt a deep sense of pride for the Wang clan to have such a descendant. Big Uncle. A glint flashed across Wang Chong's eyes. Big Uncle wasn't the only one who had come to welcome him. Through the crowd, Wang Chong saw little Uncle Wang Mi, Big Aunt Wang Ru Shuang, Cousin Wang Liang, and even Cousin Wang Li. Even though Wang Li's face was still cold, the expression in his eyes spoke volumes. Other than the kin of the Wang clan, Wang Chong also saw many familiar faces amidst the welcoming crowd. Elder Yi, Duke of Hu, Elder Zhao, Elder Sun, Elder Ma. All of grandfather's old subordinates had gathered here, and they were excitedly cheering and applauding for him. Other than them, Wang Chong also saw many other officials. Most of them were strangers to Wang Chong. Yet, all of them were smiling at him. Ping! Suddenly, a firework burst into the sky amidst the crowd. Following which, countless fireworks burst into the sky. It wasn't just in the vicinity of the royal palace. In the entire capital, regardless of whether they knew each other or not, everyone chose to set off fireworks and firecrackers on this day to celebrate for Wang Chong. The entire capital was in a festive mood. Wang Chong didn't stay for too long. Under his big uncle's lead, after greeting the officials in the royal court, he immediately dived into a carriage that had been prepared beforehand. Pa! A moment ago, Wang Chong was still immersed in the joy of being able to see the light of day once more. But in the next instant, a fair calf appeared before Wang Chong's eyes, and with a loud "pa," Wang Chong was knocked to the ground by a tremendous force. He was pinned firmly onto the carpet of the carriage, unable to move at all. Second sister. Wang Chong's face paled in fright. Even though it was just a fleeting glance, Wang Chong could clearly see that the figure dressed in red with a stern expression leaning against the wall of the carriage was none other than his cousin, Wang Zhuyan. It was no wonder he didn't see her amidst the crowd. She had been hiding here all along. A moment ago, he was still enjoying the admiration of the crowd, and in the next instant, he was smashed to the ground. This surprise came a little too quickly. Brat, if you dare to write such a careless memorial again, don't blame second sister for getting nasty. Before Wang Chong could say anything, a familiar voice sounded from above him. Wang Chong's body was initially stiff and he was prepared to struggle, but upon hearing those words, his heart warmed and his body softened. Second sister, I know my mistake. I won't be so careless next time. Wang Chong said softly. Remember your words. Cousin Wang Zhuyan's voice was still cold, but she loosened her grip and retracted her leg. Then, she sat by the side and turned her head away. For some reason, Wang Chong felt that his cousin's eyes were moist, as though she had been crying. I'm sorry, second sister. Wang Chong sat up and apologized seriously. Although they weren't biological siblings, and although she sometimes treated him violently and was unreasonable, his second sister treated him so well that nothing could be said about it. There were many times when Wang Chong felt that his cousin was his blood-related second sister. If not for the fact that she was concerned about him and loved him, she might not have gotten so angry. Do you know how big of a trouble you have caused this time? This isn't a small matter. Do you know how worried little uncle, my father, your mother, and all of us are? Cousin Wang Zhuyan's face was still cold, but her expression was much better than before. This regional commander's incident was a huge blow and test to the entire Wang clan. Even though the outcome was positive and Wang Chong was released, only those who were personally involved in the matter knew how dangerous it was. For so many of the Hu generals by the borders to demand for Wang Chong's death, including many of the generals by the borders and the protector general of the empire, this was something unimaginable to many people. Wang Zhuyan almost thought that Wang Chong was really going to die. Wang Chong had gotten into trouble before, but it wasn't as big as this one. How could Wang Zhuyan not be worried and angry? Second sister, aren't I fine now? Right, second sister, I have a small present for you this time. Wang Chong suddenly took out an object and said with a fawning smile. Don't give me that. I'm trying to divert my attention again. What's this? It looks so ugly. Hee, this is called a hair clip. I made it from a piece of metal. It can be used to fix your hair. If your hair clip is ugly, I can redesign it and add a butterfly on it. That way, it will definitely look better. Wang Chong said with a smile. Wang Chong's hair clip was actually just a thick piece of metal wire made into a U shape. This was the simplest hair clip. Of course, on the basis of this U-shape hair clip, it was possible to create all kinds of beautiful hair clips. This was just the beginning. Wang Chong wasn't too interested in such a thing, and he didn't expect to make a fortune from it. However, it should be sufficient for him to please his cousin and her close friends. As expected, after his cousin tried out the hair clip made by Wang Chong, and upon realizing that it was effective, her interest was piqued. Thus, she didn't bring up the matter of Wang Chong's imprisonment anymore. She only said that Wang Chong's item this time was too ugly, and she forced Wang Chong to make a few prettier ones. Chapter 176. After escaping from Cousin's claws, the carriage continued on its way, and amidst the cheers of the crowd, it departed from the palace gates, heading in the direction of the Wang family residence. At this time, the person Wang Chong wanted to see the most was his mother. This time, when he wrote a memorial to the Holy Emperor, he acted on his own and did not report to his mother. In the end, he caused such a big mess, and he did not know how his mother would be worried. For the past 3 months, he had been confined, and his mother was probably suffering as well. When he was released from prison this time, he didn't see his mother among the welcoming crowd. However, Wang Chong knew that it wasn't because his mother didn't love him or care about him. It was because his mother's identity wasn't suitable for her to be there. Little brother, you're back. Just as Wang Chong got off the carriage, a girl's eyes lit up at the entrance. Then, she ran over and threw herself into Wang Chong's embrace like a young bird returning to the forest. The immense force caused Wang Chong to stagger. He could not withstand it even with his essence chi. Little sister, your strength has increased again. Wang Chong hugged his little sister and smiled bitterly. During this period of time, he did not slack off. Whenever he had time, he would cultivate. His skills improved by leaps and bounds. However, it seemed like his little sister wasn't idle either. Other people trained to gain strength, but his little sister ate to gain strength. Only his little sister, who was born with divine strength, could force him to such a state with just physical strength. Little brother, don't make fun of me. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite. The Wang family's little sister raised her head abruptly and glared at Wang Chong. Her small eyes were filled with killing intent. Wang Chong burst into laughter. How would he dare to say anything else? Although his little sister was innocent, she was quite fierce when she was angry. With his strength, he might not be able to defeat her. After greeting his little sister, Wang Chong went to visit his mother. Then, he met Shanhai, Meng Long, Arloja, Ablanadan, Tuoba Guiyuan, Li Zhuxin, and Mayase Mayaka. Young master, welcome back. This was Mayase Mayaka. Hee, I almost thought you wouldn't come back. This was Li Zhuxin. Naturally, Wang Chong smiled at Mayase Mayaka. As for Li Zhuxin, Wang Chong could only roll his eyes. Mr. Li, aren't you afraid that no one will pay you next month? That's true. There aren't many employers as generous as you, young master. Li Zhuxin replied with a smile. Although they talked back and forth, Wang Chong could clearly feel that everyone's impression of him was obviously different now that he was back. However, they were still as close as before. In addition, when Wang Chong came back this time, he found that he had received a lot of letters. All of them were sent to him by Han generals from all over the country. Everyone knew that Wang Chong would be released from prison 3 months ago. Thus, other than congratulating Wang Chong on his release, they sent the letters over to Wang Chong to invite Wang Chong to join their armies. Even though they didn't dare to claim a high position and generous salary, given their authority over the military, it wouldn't be a problem for them to confer a captain or even a commandant. Just based on this, Wang Chong was already standing at a higher starting point than most of them. "Gongzi, which of these invitations do you want?" A voice sounded from behind. Shen Hai and Meng Long looked at the mountain of invitations in Wang Chong's study, and their eyes were filled with envy. The two of them came from the military, and they knew how envious Wang Chong's fortuitous encounter was. That was a captain and a commandant they were talking about. Even in their entire lives in the military, they had never reached such heights before. To think that their young master would be able to achieve such a position as soon as he entered the military. To most people, this was something that they would never be able to achieve in their entire lives. But to Wang Chong, all he had to do was nod his head. If it was someone else, it might cause a huge controversy. However, if it was his young master, he believed that from the top to the bottom, from the officials of the imperial court to the generals and even the soldiers, no one would say anything. Even the Holy Emperor would be happy to see it happen. Otherwise, he wouldn't have withstood the pressure from the Hu generals to protect Wang Chong. Even though it looks tempting, you are thinking too much. I won't choose any of these invitations. Wang Chong looked at them for a moment before placing the invitations back on the table. Ah! Why? The two of them were dumbfounded. "Gongzi, this is a captain and commandant. If you can become a captain and commandant the moment you enter the military, Gongzi can save many years of hard work." Shen Hai and Meng Long were astonished. Let me ask you. Given my current strength, do you think that I am qualified to become a commandant? The military is a place where strength is important. Even if I were to enter, I wouldn't be able to follow orders. At this moment, Wang Chong had calmed down. Even though the prospects were wonderful, Wang Chong knew what he wanted and what he didn't. Furthermore, the training camp is about to open. I can't join the military. Too many things could happen in 3 months. Not only was the matter of the 3 great training camps settled, even the large-scale construction work had been completed. On the other hand, all of the instructors, personnel, and equipment had been assigned to the camps. This was what Uncle Li Lin had told him. Due to the tight schedule, he only had 2 to 3 days left. 3 months of imprisonment. Wang Chong thought that he would miss out on the most important event in the history of the great Tang Empire. But from the looks of it, the Holy Emperor had already given him sufficient time. But even if I were to graduate from the training camps, I won't be able to become a commandant. Meng Long was perplexed. Meng Long, you still don't understand. You'll understand in the future. The 3 great training camps are an unprecedented undertaking of the Tang dynasty. Being able to join them is definitely better than just trying to get an official position. Wang Chong said with a smile, not going overboard. But even if that's the case, Gongzi can still wait until you graduate from the training camps before joining one of the generals. Shen Hai said. Wang Chong's father, Wang Yan, was a general of the Tang dynasty, but among these letters, there were quite a few who were even more influential than Wang Chong's father. This time, Wang Chong didn't say anything, only shaking his head. He had his own considerations, and he wasn't the kind of person who could accept restrictions. The crisis that the Tang dynasty would face in the future also determined that he wouldn't be able to follow the rules like others, working hard to advance step by step in order to obtain an official position under a general. Wang Chong's ambitions didn't lie in this. Becoming a high official was just a means for him to achieve his dreams, but it wasn't his true goal. Leaving the study, Wang Chong welcomed his first batch of guests. Paying respects to Gongzi. 8 burly men, the instructors of the Imperial Army, stood in a row before Wang Chong. These Imperial Army instructors looked to be in their 40s or 50s. Every single one of them had a dignified bearing, and they exuded a sharp and capable aura. Such a person would definitely be looked up to by everyone in the imperial palace. But before Wang Chong, the 8 imperial army instructors lowered their heads and straightened their backs. We were all recommended by Lord Wang Mi. The instructors of the imperial army have strict rules. Even after retiring from the army, they aren't allowed to casually teach others. We were worried that Gongzi might have some ulterior motives, but from the looks of it now, we were overthinking it. Just based on Gongzi's actions, no matter what Gongzi wants to do, we are willing to lend our meager strength to you. It's too polite to talk about money. Just based on Gongzi's reputation, we are willing to serve Gongzi for free. The 8 of us are only the first batch. We are helping Gongzi get in touch with 8 other experienced instructors. We are willing to serve Gongzi for free. They will be going around tomorrow, that the 8 of them spoke respectfully to Wang Chong, as though he was their most respected person. Great! Wang Chong was taken aback for a moment before he rejoiced. Those experienced Imperial Army instructors were notoriously difficult to invite, and every single one of them had a stubborn personality. Even if one were to offer a high price, they might not be willing. That was also the reason why there hadn't been any movements from Little Uncle's side. Just that, Wang Chong didn't expect that after the regional commander's incident, he would actually manage to convince these stubborn Imperial Army instructors. It would already be a blessing if 2 or 3 Imperial Army instructors agreed to Wang Chong's plan. By then, he could make use of the students taught by these Imperial Army instructors to select the best among them and expand the scope of his plan. Even though it would take a long time, it wasn't a bad idea either. But now, 8 experienced Imperial Army instructors had come, and this was only the first batch. This had far exceeded Wang Chong's expectations. Furthermore, these stubborn Imperial Army instructors were even willing to help him without asking anything in return. This was something that Wang Chong didn't dare to imagine at the start. With these people, he would be able to carry out his plan faster and more comprehensively. To Wang Chong, there was no better news than this. It could be said that this was the best news that he had heard today. Everyone, I'm honored to receive your help. Wang Chong was overjoyed. However, the matter of the betrothal fee was something that had been discussed from the start. Thus, it would be best to go by the agreement. I'll pay everyone according to the betrothal fee we agreed on. As for the matter of free, Wang Chong appreciates your kind intentions. Wang Chong said. Wang Gongzi, we've already discussed beforehand that we're willing to help you for free. It's out of respect for you, as well as your actions that we agreed to your request. It's not for the betrothal fee. If Gongzi insists on paying us the betrothal fee, are you intending to humiliate us? One of the instructors of the Imperial Army, who looked like a bear, said with a solemn expression. This, Wang Chong was stunned. Chapter 177. Everyone, the reason why Wang Chong is doing this is because he hopes to recruit more Imperial Army instructors to help me. If they were to know that I don't pay any engagement fees, wouldn't it mean that no one would come to me in the future? Why don't we do this instead? If you find it hard to accept, I'll just change it to half of the original amount. Wang Chong suddenly said with a smile. This. All right then. The 8 Imperial Army instructors glanced at one another. Thinking that Wang Chong's words made sense, they reluctantly nodded their heads. Upon seeing this sight, Wang Chong finally smiled. What came next was the details of the matter. It was already certain that Wang Chong's training camp would be built on top of the spirit vein. With his teacher, the evil emperor, presiding over it, and these powerful Imperial Army instructors, it was an impregnable fortress. Ordinary powers wouldn't be able to lay their eyes on Wang Chong's spirit vein. As for the construction of the training camp, Wang Chong had already started investing money into it a long time ago. Even though it wasn't guaranteed to happen so quickly, Wang Chong believed that it would take shape within 3 months. Great! To think that Gongzi would have a spirit vein. It's no wonder why Gongzi wanted to recruit so many Imperial Army instructors. Gongzi, don't worry, we'll set off in the next few days and do as Gongzi says. The 8 muscular and burly instructors of the Imperial Army were overjoyed. Even though the Wang clan was famous, they didn't have a deep foundation. In the first place, they were impressed by Wang Chang's character, so they volunteered to help him. Just that, they didn't expect Wang Chong to be so well prepared. Spirit veins weren't something that just any power could possess. The Imperial Army instructors were swift and decisive, and their promises were worth their weight in gold. After agreeing to Wang Chang's request, a Wang clan guard led the way to the spirit vein in the middle of the mountain range according to the map Wang Chong had given him. Wang Gongzi, it has been a long time. Not long after the 8 Imperial Army instructors left, another wave of students arrived. A middle-aged man wearing a white robe that dragged on the ground, with an outstanding demeanor and a simple hairstyle, slowly walked in from the outside. Wang Chang's memorial to the throne had stirred up the court and the world. Now that he had been released after 3 months, it was unknown how many people's attention he had attracted. It was destined that Wang Chong would not be able to relax easily. You are. Wang Chong frowned and looked in surprise at the strange man who had just walked in. Wang Chong believed that the guards at the entrance wouldn't allow a random person to barge in. However, Wang Chong did not look familiar. Wang Gongzi, we just met a few months ago. At that time, young master even gave me 1,000 taels of gold. Could it be that young master has forgotten? The newcomer laughed out loud. 1,000 gold taels. Wang Chong was even more confused. Although he was now truly wealthy, 1,000 taels of gold was not a small amount. If he had given it to someone before, it would have been impossible for it not to have happened. How is this possible? What is the background of this person? Wang Chong narrowed his eyes as a thought flashed through his mind. Wang Chong knew that he had not reached the level of forgetfulness. If it was someone whom he had met before, he would surely be able to remember them. However, this person before him, Wang Chong had no impression of him at all. Young master sure is forgetful. Do you still remember the person you helped near the Blue Bottle Pavilion? The smile on the newcomer's face finally retracted as he spoke. Boom! As though a bolt of lightning flashing across his mind, Wang Chong widened his eyes in disbelief. It's you! Wang Chong finally knew who the person before him was. However, after knowing the identity of the person before him, Wang Chong felt even more disbelief. Yang Zhao. That person was Yang Zhao, the one whom he met outside the Blue Bottle Pavilion, the disheveled and unkempt man who looked like a hoodlum. The future imperial uncle of the Tang dynasty. The reason why Wang Chong had such a deep impression of him was because he would have an even more shocking name in the future, Yang Guizhong. Yang Zhao was his original name, while Guizhong was the name he would use in the future when his career was at its peak. However, other than Wang Chong, no one else knew of this. This included Yang Zhao himself. It's him. How can a person's disposition change so drastically? Wang Chong was truly shocked. This was the first time he had seen a person's disposition change to such an extent. He had seen Yang Zhao's destitute state before, and he was a complete hooligan. However, the current Yang Zhao was completely different from that of a hooligan. Instead, he looked just like a distinguished scholar. At this moment, Yang Zhao's every single action and demeanor was something that even the officials of the royal court would feel inferior to. He was even more like a physician than a physician. No wonder he could rise to fame in the royal court in the future and stir up a storm. Just based on his temperament and appearance, he is definitely not inferior to those important figures in the imperial court. Wang Chong knew Yang Zhao's background. But at this time, Wang Chong could not help but be deeply impressed. Even he himself could not achieve this kind of appearance. Young master should not know who I am. My surname is Yang, and my name is Zhao. Consort Tai Zhen is my closest cousin. Yang Zhao bowed and announced his name with a proud look on his face. Just this smug look on his face had completely destroyed the image of a distinguished scholar that he had painstakingly built up. In essence, Yang Zhao was still a commoner. So you are Consort Taizhen's cousin. Wang Chong pretended to be surprised, but he was secretly laughing in his heart. From the first time he met Yang Zhao, he had already known about the latter's background. But he could not say it directly in front of Yang Zhao. I am indebted to young master for giving me 1,000 taels of gold last time, but Yang Zhao did not have the chance to thank young master. Yang Zhao has already prepared 1,000 taels of gold outside and placed it in the carriage. In a while, I will have someone send it up and return it to young master. Yang Zhao said with a straight face. It would be weird if I believed you. Wang Chong laughed in his heart. Knowing who the person in front of him was and his style of conduct, it would be weird if Wang Chong believed that there was 1,000 taels of gold in the carriage. In his previous life, Yang Zhao was famous and everyone knew about him. Although he was ignorant and incompetent, as long as it was related to money, he would immediately become extremely shrewd. This could be considered as showing his true colors. He had spent most of his life in the gambling house, and although he did not learn anything else, he was very shrewd in this aspect. It was impossible for such a person to spit out what he had eaten. Lord Yang is too polite. Giving it away is giving it away. That is also a small token of my appreciation. There is no need for Lord Yang to stand on ceremony. Wang Chong said. Since that is the case, then I will not stand on ceremony with young master. Yang Zhao was just being polite, and he knew when to stop. If Wang Chong really wanted to accept it, he really did not have 1,000 taels of gold in the carriage. Oh right, actually this time, I am also here on a mission. This is a letter written by Her Highness, why don't young master take a look? Oh. Wang Chong glanced at Yang Zhao and was greatly surprised. After all this time, it turned out that the person who wanted to see him was Consort Taizhen. He took the letter from Yang Zhao's hands and glanced at it. The handwriting on the title page was written in silk, and it had the aura of a scholarly family. It really is Consort Taizhen's handwriting. Wang Chong was secretly surprised. Consort Taizhen had a habit of hiring others to write for her. Although her handwriting was neat and elegant, it was not her own. In his previous life, there were very few authentic Consort Taizhen's handwriting. Who would have thought that he would receive one? Consort Taizhen's handwriting was thin, somewhat similar to the thin golden figure in Wang Chong's memory. However, there was a hint of feminine embroidery. Smelling it, there was also a faint fragrance of an orchid and musk, causing one's heart to flutter. Wang Chong's heart skipped a beat. Knowing that he was in danger, he quickly calmed down and opened the letter, reading it carefully. The contents of Consort Taizhen's letter were very ordinary. First, she scolded Wang Chong, saying that Wang Chong was extremely daring to impersonate the king of song and write a poem for her. Then, she praised him again. She said that his poem was extremely beautiful and full of spirituality. He praised his poem and asked. The last sentence was, since there is a poem of purity and peace, there is naturally a second. Young master is very talented. I wonder if you can compose one as soon as possible so that I can reward you. There is not only a second poem of purity and peace, there is a third. When Wang Chong saw this, he understood what Yang Zhao was here for. The poem of purity and peace, in his memory was indeed very powerful. He was not the only one who suffered from the 3 months of imprisonment. There was also that person in the palace. Otherwise, she wouldn't have sent Yang Zhao to his house in a hurry to ask for a poem on the first day he was released from prison. After all, that person was someone who loved poetry. I don't know anything about poetry. I don't know how to appreciate it either. However, Her Highness did say that your poems are very good. If you have the time, I hope that you can come to Yuzhen Palace more often. Yang Zhao touched his nose and said embarrassedly. What Yang Zhao liked was money, but consort Taizhen sent him to ask for a poem. In this aspect, Yang Zhao really couldn't be said to have any accomplishments, let alone say anything. If Wang Chong invited him to talk about poetry, it would be awkward. It was better to expose his shortcomings to avoid embarrassment. Lord Yang is too humble. Since Her Highness wants to see it, I will do it immediately. Wang Chong didn't expose his shortcomings. There was a ready-made brush, ink, paper, and inkstone in the room. Wang Chong didn't stand on ceremony. After a moment of silence, he began to write the second poem of purity and peace in his memory. Wang Chong didn't give this poem to consort Taizhen. It wasn't because he was deliberately mystifying or trying to show off his talent. It was because this poem was very taboo. In another time and space, the mention of Zhao Fian in the poem of purity and peace almost caused Li Bai's head to roll. It was also because of this reason that Wang Chong didn't write the follow-up. However, 3 months was enough for Wang Chong to think of a countermeasure. With this thought in mind, Wang Chong quickly wrote down the famous song of purity and peace, Ci2. A fragrant red dew. Clouds and rain on Mount Wu's broken intestines. May I ask who is similar in spring and autumn? Poor Shizi, her makeup covered in tears. 4 lines of 28 words were written in the time of a few breaths. Yang Zhao couldn't help but stare at it. Although he was ignorant, he wasn't completely clueless. Every talented person would need to prepare in advance. Although the number of words in a poem was small, it took a long time. An hour was considered short. There were many people who couldn't write a sentence in hours or even days. But Wang Chong wrote in a hurry, not even taking a few breaths. This ability left Yang Zhao dumbfounded. He finally knew how impressive Wang Chong's poetic talent was. The youth in front of him couldn't be understood with common sense. How impressive. Chapter 178. Translator, Transin Editor, Transin Wang Chong ignored Yang Zhao. Looking at the Song of Purity and Peace, he nodded his head in satisfaction. In another time-space, Li Bai was drunk and obeying the emperor's orders. Although he was full of poetry, he was drunk and didn't think it through. In the last 2 lines, he wrote, "Who in the Han Palace looks like her? A pitiful swallow leaning on her new makeup." In another time-space, when Wang Chong first saw this line, he thought that Li Bai was praising Yang Taizhen for being more beautiful than Zhao Fian. Later on, he found out that this was not the case. In the poem, pitiful meant cute, while leaning on her new makeup referred to the beauty's delicate expression. Here, Yang Taizhen was compared to the Zhao Fian of the Han dynasty. Who was Zhao Fian? Zhao Fian, who danced on the palm, was referring to her. She was the empress of the Han dynasty. Her figure was graceful and light, able to dance on the palm. Legend has it that when the Han dynasty stretched out his palm, Zhao Fian danced on it. Zhao Fian's beauty was unimaginable. Li Bai comparing Yang Taizhen to Zhao Fian was a compliment. However, he didn't know that other than her graceful figure and being able to dance on the palm, Zhao Fian also had a famous story, swallow pecking the imperial grandson. This story was written by Luo Binwang in for Su Jingye quelling martial arts and included in Guwen Guanji. Although Zhao Fian had the beauty that captivated even the birds and beasts, the moon that shamed the flowers, and her lithe figure that could dance on the palm, she had a venomous heart and was prone to jealousy. Emperor Cheng of Han was poisoned to death by her, causing the deaths of countless princes and grandsons. Li Bai compared Yang Taizhen to a venomous Zhao Fian who would poison the princes and grandsons in the future. Wasn't he courting death? If it weren't for the fact that he was really well versed in poetry and had outstanding talent, unparalleled in the palace, he would have been a dead man at that time. The world Wang Chong lived in was different from that time-space. Li Bai was gone, and so was Du Fu. But Emperor Cheng of Han and Zhao Fian did. As for the consort Taizhen in the palace, she had done a lot of research on poetry. If he really wrote a Song of Purity in PCI2 and cursed her to be the vicious Zhao Fian, wouldn't he offend her to death? There was no need to mention the friendship of the Song of Purity and Peace that he had written before. They were about to become mortal enemies, and they would not rest until one of them was dead. There was no way Wang Chong would dare to give it to her. However, it would not be a problem if he made some slight changes. Shizi was also one of the four great beauties. The beauty that could captivate even the birds and beasts, and the beauty that outshines the moon and shames the flowers, came from her. It was said that her beauty had reached the pinnacle. When she washed up by the lake, the fish were suffocated by her beauty and forgot to breathe, sinking to the bottom of the water. When flowers saw her, they would automatically close their petals and become dull, not daring to compete with her for beauty. One could only imagine how beautiful Shizi was. More importantly, King Wu, whom she served, was also a monarch. As for whether or not there was anything on Shizi that could trigger taboos, associations, or hatred, Wang Chong couldn't be bothered to think about it. Li Taibai was still too timid, only daring to compare Yang Taizhen to Zhao Fian. Wang Chong directly asked her to surpass Shizi. Even if there were any problems, there would be no more problems. The consort has entered the palace. Wang Chong had nothing to congratulate her for being conferred the title of consort. Let's write another poem to celebrate. Wang Chong suddenly said. Since he had already written the Song of Purity in PCI2, he might as well write the Song of Purity in PCI3 as well. Good. 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 That would be great. The consort will definitely like it very much. Yang Zhao's eyes lit up and he applauded. This was not flattery. Only those who lived in the palace would know how much the consort loved poetry. The words that Wang Chong wrote previously were so crooked that even the consort kept it close to her body. She did not despise it at all and took it out to read almost every day. If Wang Chong were to take out 2 poems at once, she would be overjoyed. Furthermore, Wang Chong's current poems were not simple. Perhaps even he himself did not know about it. He was already famous for his poems. Just the poem he wrote previously had solidified the consort's title as the #1 beauty in the palace. If he could write a few more of such poems, wouldn't it help the consort stabilize her position? If the consort's position was stable, he would naturally be as stable as Mount Tai. Yang Zhao was aware of the relationship between the two. This is a noble. Yang Zhao watched as Wang Chong picked up the brush with a strange look in his eyes. On the other side, Wang Chong stood behind the desk with a brush in his hand. Without much hesitation, he began to write Song of Purity in Peace 3. Compared to the extremely controversial Song of Purity in Peace 2, which almost brought about the disaster of being beheaded, this poem was much more peaceful. There were not many disputes. However, the 3 poems of purity in peace had a sequence. Before the second poem, Wang Chong did not dare to show off the third poem. Consort Taizhen is now officially conferred the title of consort. Writing this Song of Purity in Peace 3 can be considered appropriate. As Wang Chong thought to himself, he quickly pressed down the paperweight and began to write. Famous flowers toppling a nation in joy. The 7 words were crooked, but between the lines, there was a kind of fresh elegance. A different kind of charm came out of the paper and assaulted one's face. Wang Chong did not delay. After a pause, he continued to write. Looks like the emperor will smile. Explains the infinite hatred of the spring breeze. Agarwood Pavilion leaning against the north railing. After writing the 28 words, Wang Chong heaved a sigh of relief. I heard that the scenery of the Agarwood Pavilion in the palace is very beautiful. When Lord Yang goes back, you might as well tell consort that if consort is free, perhaps she can go there to have a look. After saying this, Wang Chong flicked the paper and gave it to Yang Zhao. Thank you. Thank you. Yang Zhao hurriedly took it, carefully folded it and put it in his sleeve. Young Master Yang is very talented. Not only do you do business, but you also write essays. You can also be appointed by Emperor Song and have the protection of hundreds of officials. I hope that we can have more contact in the future. Of course, of course. If Lord Yang wants to come in the future, Wang Chong will welcome you at any time. Wang Chong returned the courtesy. The current Yang Zhao had already embarked on the Guizhong path that was destined for him. In Wang Chong's memory, he would probably become the imperial uncle in less than a year, leaping from Yang Zhao to that Yang Guizhong. At the same time, the consort Taizhen behind him would rise higher and higher. In the end, he would go from an imperial consort to a real imperial consort. The wheel of history was already turning, and Wang Chong could not stop it. He could only get used to it and approach it. Since the wheel would always turn and could not stop, then he would try his best to make the wheel move in a direction that was beneficial to him. Shanhai, go. Bring me 5,000 taels of gold and give it to Lord Yang. As these thoughts flashed through Wang Chong's mind, he suddenly waved his hand towards the door. Yes, this subordinate will do it right away. The rumbling footsteps left, and Shanhai quickly disappeared outside to fetch the gold. This, how can I accept this? Yang Zhao was startled at first, but then a smile blossomed on his face. What's there to be embarrassed about? It's just 5,000 taels of gold, it's just a token of my appreciation. Lord Yang, there's no need to take it to heart. Wang Chong waved his hands casually. He, what Lord Yang? Just call me Brother Yang. Wang Gongzi, since we hit it off, why don't we become sworn brothers? Yang Zhao looked at Wang Chong and suddenly said. Become sworn brothers? Sworn brothers? Wang Chong was stunned. His first reaction was to wonder if Yang Zhao was joking with him. Between him and Yang Zhao, one was already in his 40s while the other was only 15. How could they become sworn brothers under such circumstances? He had heard of friends across generations, but he had never heard of sworn brothers across generations. However, when he raised his head and looked at Yang Zhao carefully, Wang Chong realized that the other party was completely serious. There wasn't the slightest bit of falsehood in his words. Wang Chong was taken aback. When he finally recovered, Wang Chong was delighted. Great! This guy was much more powerful than him. He only wanted to spend some money to win people's hearts. But this guy directly asked him to become sworn brothers. Even though there was such a big age difference, it was not a problem at all. At this moment, Wang Chong was truly impressed by this future imperial brother-in-law. Compared with him, he was still a child's play, be it in terms of means or shamelessness. It was no wonder that this person would be able to do whatever he wanted in the court in the future and occupy a very important position in the history of the Tang dynasty. What's wrong, Wang Gongzi? Are you unwilling? Yang Zhao's voice came into his ears. He was just trying to ask on a whim. If Wang Chong flinched, he naturally wouldn't force him. Why would I? Wang Chong also came to his senses and chuckled. It's rare for you to take care of me. Wang Chong is willing to come in time. Since that's the case, why don't we choose today to become sworn brothers? So we have the same idea. Great. Let's become sworn brothers today. Yang Zhao immediately said excitedly. Wang Chong was the descendant of Duke Jiu. He came from a famous family and was valued by the king of Song. Now, because of the memorial he submitted, he had won the favor of the civil and military officials of the court and the generals at the border. He was a real man of influence and a rising star in the political world. His future was bound to be limitless. In terms of status, this person was now far superior to him. Yang Zhao only asked tentatively about the matter of becoming sworn brothers. He didn't expect that Wang Chong would actually agree. For Yang Zhao, this was definitely an unexpected gain. The Wang family had ready-made money, paper, incense, and candles. Taking this opportunity, Ong Zhao hurriedly pulled Wang Chong to bow 3 times in front of the gods of heaven and earth. Then, he cut his index finger, drank the blood, and swore to become sworn brothers. Big brother. Little brother, that the two of them stood up from the ground, looked at each other, and burst into laughter. Ha ha ha, Wang Chong, from now on, you are my, Yang Zhao's, brother. Anyone who dares to harm you is equivalent to harming me, Yang Zhao. Her Highness is my younger sister, and in the future, she will be your older sister as well. In the future, you should come to the royal palace more often to play. We brothers need to get closer and interact more. Yang Zhao patted Wang Chong's shoulder vigorously. Ha ha ha, big brother, there's no need to stand on ceremony. If you need anything in the future, feel free to speak. Wang Chong also laughed. Hee hee, big brother, I am really poor right now, so I won't stand on ceremony with you. However, as your elder brother, I didn't come empty-handed this time. I also have a gift for you. But remember to open it after I leave. All of a sudden, Yang Zhao passed a box over. Blinking his eyes, he gave Zhang Xian a mysterious look. Wang Chong was taken aback, and his curiosity was piqued. Hee hee, don't forget that you can only open it after I leave. Yang Zhao smiled as he pressed down on the box. It won't be long. Her Highness is still waiting in the royal palace. You just got out of prison today, and there are many people you need to meet. I won't disturb you any further, I'll be leaving first. Big brother, I'll send you off. Wang Chong didn't stop him. He personally walked Yang Zhao to the door. Accompanying Yang Zhao on the carriage was a huge gift. Of course, this gift wasn't just 5,000 gold taels, but 50,000. Chapter 179. After Yang Zhao left, Wang Chong was still in a daze. How unexpected, Wang Chong shook his head as he muttered to himself. There was an indescribable feeling in his heart. This was the arrogant imperial uncle from his previous life, the one who would shake his head and say, Gongzi is a talented man with a bright future ahead of you. In reality, his words were insincere and insincere. As for Wang Chong, they became sworn brothers when Wang Chong was still in a humble position. This was something that had never happened in his previous life, and it left Wang Chong with an indescribable feeling. However, there was one thing that Wang Chong was certain of. Yang Zhao's existence was crucial to him changing the fate of the empire and dealing with the hidden crocodile in the royal court. Becoming sworn brothers with Wang Chong was beneficial to him. I wonder what he gave me. Wang Chong suddenly recalled the gift that Yang Zhao spoke of. Before Yang Zhao left, he had said that he could only open it after Wang Chong left. Now that Yang Zhao had left, he should be able to open it now. Pa! Wang Chong opened the purplish-red wooden box. There were no treasures, pills, cultivation techniques, or anything shocking inside. There were only a few thin pieces of letter paper, folded and stacked inside. What is this? Wang Chong frowned in bewilderment. Wang Chong took out the topmost piece of paper from the wooden box. Opening it, he saw rows of small characters. Wang Chong's doubts grew. Since ancient times, when people became sworn brothers, there were those who gave gold, those who gave treasures, and those who gave nothing at all. The only one who didn't give a letter was a letter. Opening the letter, Wang Chong's heart sank when he saw the seal at the end. He finally knew what Yang Zhao had given him. King Qi. Wang Chong's heart pounded. He finally understood what was going on. The letters in the exquisite purplish-red wooden box were all letters written by Prince Qi to consort Taizhen. The content of the letter was also very simple. It was all about King Qi encouraging consort Taizhen to join forces with him to deal with the King of Song. Wang Chong counted 5 to 6 letters in total, and the content was almost the same. They were all encouraging consort Tai Jin to join forces with him. It was clear that King Qi had launched a massive offensive on consort Tai Jin's side. However, in the end, consort Tai Jin still chose the King of Song. Otherwise, he wouldn't have received the notification from the Stone of Destiny while he was in prison. Yang Zhao, you're doing a favor for consort Tai Jin, and you're also doing me a favor. Wang Chong understood what Yang Zhao meant. If he were to give these letters to the King of Song, it would be a meritorious deed. At the very least, the King of Song would owe the Wang clan a favor. After carefully placing the letters back into the wooden box, Wang Chong put them back into the drawer of his study. After settling the matters at home, Wang Chong didn't alarm anyone and headed to the Ghost Tree District in the west of the city alone. The Ghost Tree District was quiet and serene. Under the massive ghost tree, Wang Chong saw a thin figure dressed in black sitting cross-legged, waiting silently. Elder. Wang Chong walked over and bowed. You're back. So Yung-sun said calmly. His thin face was still expressionless, but Wang Chong could still sense a sense of concern. Yes. Wang Chong nodded. Suffering is the tempering of life. Entering the imperial prison once isn't a big deal. Young man, it'll be beneficial for you in the future if you go through some tempering. So Yung-sun said calmly. Yes, this junior has learned his lesson. Even though Wang Chong was usually a cheeky person in front of Su Jingchen, at this moment, he adopted a humble and respectful attitude, accepting the other party's teachings humbly. Wang Chong knew of So Yung-sun's experiences, so he knew that So Yung-sun had the right to say such words to him. Compared to his life experiences and the hardships he had gone through, entering the imperial prison was indeed nothing. It's good that you can understand this. Sit down and play around with me. So Yung-sun finally reached out a hand and pointed to the seat opposite him, gesturing for Wang Chong to sit down. Yes, elder. Wang Chong heaved a sigh of relief and knelt down opposite So Yung-sun. An old man and a young man, each holding a black and white chessboard, started fighting again. So Yung-sun looked calm and spoke little, no different from before. On the other hand, Wang Chong felt a little uneasy when he thought of what So Yung-sun had said. He almost lost a few chess pieces to So Yung-sun. Focus your mind and calm your qi. Nothing is outside your mind. Fame and fortune, all the love and humiliation are just outside your body. Even if they are outside your body, what could possibly affect your mind? So Yung-sun lowered his head and said calmly. Wang Chong was startled. He had a feeling that So Yung-sun was using his release from prison to teach him something. This had never happened before. This gave Wang Chong a strange feeling, but Wang Chong did not reject it. Yes, this junior understands. Wang Chong took a deep breath. As he recalled the experiences of his last life, he quickly calmed down. Although each person walked a different path, when it came to fame and fortune, the two shared the same view. So Yung-sun was willing to hand over his authority when he was at the height of his power. It was clear that he had no attachment to the authority that everyone yearned for. As for Wang Chong had always been well aware that authority was only a means for him to realize his mission, not the ultimate goal. With this thought, Wang Chong grinned and quickly calmed down. On the chessboard, he once again defeated the war god So Yung-sun. So Yung-sun's eyes flashed with praise. He spread out the chess pieces and once more began to play against Wang Chong. Round after round, match after match, Su Jingchen had never won a single one of them. There was no day or night on the chessboard, and it was impossible to sense the passage of time. It had been a long time since the two had fought, and even So Yung-sun had lost track of time. Before they knew it, night had fallen. On this day, Wang Chong and So Yung-sun played later than any other day. He's here, I found him. While the two were playing, a commotion suddenly came from behind them. Wang Chong paled, and before he could react, he heard a familiar voice at his ear. Ha ha ha, young Master Wang, you've truly been looking for me. Today is the day you were released from prison. His Highness wanted to hold a welcoming dinner for you, but I didn't expect to find you. Not even the Wang clan. So you were hiding here. In the darkness, a figure in a wide-sleeved robe walked over. Lu Ting. In the darkness of the night, as the distance closed, the person's face immediately became clear. It was the king of Song's aide, Lu Ting. Few people came to the Ghost Tree district, and Wang Chong had never brought anyone here before. Wang Chong didn't know why Lu Ting was here, nor did he know why he was here. If it was in the past, Wang Chong would definitely be overjoyed to see Lu Ting here, and he would even be willing to drink and chat with him. But now was definitely not the time. Haha, no wonder I couldn't find you. So you were playing chess with someone here, playing chess. A moment ago, Lu Ting was still laughing, his face full of smiles. But the next moment, when he saw the figure opposite Wang Chong, Lu Ting's eyes widened in shock. You. Lu Ting pays respect to Su Gong. Pang, Lu Ting's knees buckled, and he suddenly knelt before So Young-sun. His expression was respectful, and his body was trembling slightly. It was clear how shocked he was. Upon hearing Su Gong from Lu Ting's mouth, Wang Chong and So Young-sun's expressions changed as well. Other than Shanghai and Meng Long, who were extremely loyal and reliable, Wang Chong didn't bring anyone else here. The reason why he didn't want others to know of Su Jingchen's identity was because he didn't want others to know of it. In this period of time when they played chess, Wang Chong had also never revealed So Young-sun's identity. This was already a tacit understanding. Lu Ting, on the other hand, revealed So Young-sun's identity the moment he arrived, ruining his painstaking efforts. Wang Chong, it seems like our fate has come to an end. So Young-sun stood up from behind the chessboard, and a powerful aura burst forth from his body like a tidal wave. This was the first time Wang Chong saw So Young-sun display his true strength. In an instant, Wang Chong seemed to see a majestic mountain rising from the ground in front of him. Moreover, it was growing at a speed that was several times faster than before. In the end, it reached the clouds and disappeared into the depths of the great void. In the face of this enormous aura, anyone could not help but feel a sense of insignificance. Ever since Emperor Taizong's death, So Young-sun had never revealed his name to the world. As such, many people thought that he was dead. The reason why he set up the chessboard in the Ghost Tree district, a place with ordinary people, was so that no one would know of his identity and attract attention. Now that Lu Ting had seen through him, this matter would probably spread throughout the entire court in less than a night. Elder. Wang Chong looked at So Young-sun, who had turned from an ordinary old man into a war god in an instant. He felt an indescribable feeling in his heart, as if he had lost something important. Wang Chong knew that from today onwards, the two of them would probably not be able to play chess anymore. It was also impossible for them to indulge in their usual behavior, eat some beef, and drink some wine in front of him. Just like So Young-sun said, our fate has come to an end. Kid, actually, I've wanted to tell you for a long time. We can't keep playing like this. It's just that this is your first day out of prison. That's why I didn't tell you. So Young-sun placed his hands behind his back, and his aura surged as he ignored Lu Ting on the ground. Also, you should be participating in the new 3 great training camps that the court has opened, right? Yes. Wang Chong nodded, not denying it. The 3 great training camps would only be open for 2 to 3 days, which was a short time. That was why Wang Chong had rushed to see So Young-sun as soon as he was released from prison. Very well. Work hard. You have talent, so don't waste it. So Young-sun opened his palm, and a white chess piece flew up from the chessboard and into his palm. Fate comes and goes. Fate comes and goes. This white chess piece is my gift to you. Take good care of it. I hope that you will be like this chess piece. No matter what happens, you will always be true to yourself and never forget your original intentions. Whoosh! The white chess piece entered Wang Chang's palm, and the originally calm space was suddenly filled with a strong gust of wind. So Yongsun's robes fluttered in the wind as he strode forward. This time, he was faster than he had ever been. Don't forget your original intentions. Perhaps we will meet again. Otherwise, we will never meet again. Chapter 180. Sigh, Lu Ting, you spoiled my plans. After So Yongsun left, Wang Chong couldn't help but stomp his feet and sigh. It wasn't easy for him to keep this secret for several months. Even Shanhai and Meng Long didn't know the identity of this old man who played chess with them every day even though they had met So Yongsun before. In the end, Lu Ting's arrival ruined everything. Plans? What plans? Wang Chong, tell me, how did you get to know Su Gong So Yongsun? Furthermore, you even know how to play chess with him. Lu Ting climbed up from the ground and grabbed Wang Chong. His expression was even more agitated than Wang Chong's. Lu Ting grew up listening to the legends of war god So Yongsun. There was even a portrait of him in Lu Ting's house. Many people said that Su Gong had already passed away. However, Lu Ting didn't expect to see So Yongsun here. The war god of the Tang dynasty, So Yongsun, was actually still alive. Furthermore, he was so robust and powerful. This was something that Lu Ting didn't expect. This was a miracle. Even though So Yongsun didn't even look at him once during the entire process, Lu Ting didn't mind at all. Instead, he felt that it was only natural. This was the true Su Gong. This was the true war god who looked down on the world with disdain. If Su Gong were to greet him warmly and softly, Lu Ting would suspect that he wasn't that Su Gong. However, this Su Gong was exactly the person he knew. Lu Ting was so agitated that he couldn't control himself. Wang Chong sighed in his heart. Lu Ting was clearly a fan of So Yongsun. His plan was ruined by Lu Ting and there was nothing he could do about it. So, you were already here a few months ago. After the two of them calmed down, Lu Ting roughly understood the situation from Wang Chong. If not for you, I might have been here for a few more months. Wang Chong said. Lu Ting's appearance was truly unexpected. I'm sorry, I didn't know you were here to see Su Gong. Lu Ting said apologetically. So Yongsun of the great war god Su Gong had closed his door and refused to meet any guests for several decades. Strangers were not allowed to come near him and he had never received anyone. This was a well-known fact. Back then, before the rumor of Su Gong's passing had spread like wildfire, even the princes and grandsons didn't have the chance to enter the Su residence, let alone others. Wang Chong was favored by Su Gong So Yongsun and played chess with him here every day. If this was known to others, it would probably shock a lot of people. Even a fool would know that this was a great opportunity. However, it seemed like his unintentional arrival had ruined this opportunity and made things worse for him. Lu Ting was also filled with guilt. Sigh, forget it, let's not talk about this anymore. Tell me, how did you know I was here? Wang Chong asked. Lu Ting did not hide anything and told him everything that had happened from beginning to end. It turned out that this was the first day Wang Chong was released from prison. The king of Song thought that Wang Chong must miss his family after being locked up in the imperial prison for a long time. Therefore, he planned to let Wang Chong reunite with his family first before paying a visit. In addition, the king of Song had just been reinstated and had to think of a way to deal with the troubles King Qi had dealt with in the Ministry of War and the Ministry of Justice. Therefore, when Wang Chong was released from prison, the king of Song didn't go to visit him. Later, when he felt that it was about time, he went to the Wang residence to visit Wang Chong. He didn't expect to hear that Wang Chong wasn't around and that even the Wang clan didn't know where he had gone. The king of Song didn't think much of it. He thought that Wang Chong would be back by nightfall. However, he didn't expect that Wang Chong still hadn't returned even though it was late at night and the stars were rising. He then asked Lu Ting to look for him. After hearing this, Wang Chong knew that it wasn't Lu Ting's fault. He had been locked up for 3 months. Today, when he met So Young-sun, he was in the mood to play a little longer. He didn't expect that it would attract Lu Ting's attention. Speaking of which, he couldn't be blamed for this. Perhaps, as So Young-sun said, this was heaven's will. The fate between the two had come to an end. After playing chess for several months, it was destined to end today. Lu Ting, how did you know that I was in the Ghost Tree District? Wang Chong suddenly asked with a frown. Hee, isn't that easy? I've asked hundreds of hooligans in the capital to help me look for him. How could I not find him? Lu Ting said with a smile. However, as he spoke, he suddenly realized something and his expression changed. You finally realized it. The reason why Su Gong kept a low profile for so many years was that he didn't want others to know about him. You found so many hoodlums this time. I'm afraid that the news that Su Gong is still alive will spread like wildfire tomorrow. Who knows how many people will go to the Su residence? Wang Chong said calmly. Lu Ting glanced at the silhouettes around him and his face immediately turned ashen. Su Gong was much older than him, so he was filled with respect for him. Not just him, even his father, as well as those of his generation, as long as they had experienced and knew of Su Gong's deeds, Su Gong held an extraordinary weight in their hearts. He was a meritorious official of Taizong's era, a godlike existence in the entire Central Plains Tang dynasty. They couldn't even wait to respect and protect him, so how could they be willing to disturb his peace and disturb his peace? Wait a moment. In the darkness, Lu Ting's expression was grave. He suddenly turned around and walked toward those hoodlums. Wang Chong already knew what he wanted to do, so he didn't stop him. This was an unavoidable result, and it couldn't be changed no matter what. As expected, after a while, Lu Ting came over with an ashen face and boarded the carriage with Wang Chong. The two of them tacitly didn't mention So Young-sun. Ha, Wang Chong, welcome back. Wang Chong met the king of Song in the Wang clan. The latter seemed to have been sitting there for a while. Upon seeing Wang Chong, he opened his arms and gave Wang Chong a big hug. The king of Song's admiration and favor for Wang Chong came from the bottom of his heart. Feeling the king of Song's enthusiasm, Wang Chong's mood also improved. Your Highness, congratulations on returning to your post and returning to the royal court. Wang Chong smiled and cupped his hands. At the level of the king of Song, there was no way for him to advance any further. Prince Consort was the highest title, and any higher would be equivalent to rebellion. Thus, returning to his original post was truly the best reward. It was comparable to being conferred the title of Marquis or Prime Minister. Ha, if not for you, how would I have the chance to return to the royal court? Not to mention returning to the Ministry of Justice and the Ministry of War. The king of Song looked at Wang Chong with a strange look in his eyes. He didn't hide his admiration and favor at all. If Wang Chong hadn't reminded him in time and discovered the strangeness of the consort Tai Jun incident, he and all the other officials in the royal court would have been demoted and exiled. Although Wang Chong was only 15 years old, he was the real hero who helped him return to his original post and escape the disaster. For the real hero, Wang Chong was not stingy with his rewards. Wang Chong, you've helped me so much. Tell me, what reward do you want? No matter what it is, I'll agree to it. The king of Song said generously. Obviously, he was very happy. Wang Chong doesn't want anything. Thank you, Your Highness. Wang Chong shook his head and said. It wasn't his style to ask for rewards based on one's achievements. Ha, you don't want it, but I insist on giving it to you. Someone, help me bring that white-hoofed shadow over. The king of Song suddenly shouted outside. White-hoofed shadow. Before Wang Chong could react, he heard the faint neighing of Nei's horse coming from the direction of the stable in the courtyard outside. The sound was clear and childish, with a hint of metal to it. It was completely different from ordinary horses. A foal. Wang Chong was both surprised and delighted. He suddenly understood what the king of Song wanted to give him. It should be a foal. And when a foal grew up, it would be a warhorse. On the battlefield, a good warhorse wouldn't be inferior to a Wuxia steel sword. Nay. A short while later, a cloud of dust rose outside the courtyard. Amidst the cloud of dust, a green-colored colt with glossy fur immediately galloped over, its mane fluttering in the wind. As it galloped, its 4 hooves were particularly eye-catching. They were actually white. This made it look like it was floating in the air, giving it an indescribable sense of intelligence. Wang Chong almost immediately took a liking to this foal. The foal stopped in the courtyard. A stableman with a hood over his head and a jet-black body was leading it, leaving only his eyes visible. This is an imperial horse of the palace. It has the bloodline of the Great Snow Colt from the Great Snow Mountain Temple and the white-hoofed shadow of the Central Plains. The experts of the royal family have been carefully raising it. Their numbers are very few, and they've spent a lot of effort to raise one. These imperial horses are different from other horses. They're intelligent. If anyone feeds them for a month, they'll recognize that person as their master. They'll be loyal, and they'll never change. Thus, when the stableman feeds them, he must wear a hood over his entire body and wrap it tightly. He mustn't let the foal see anything. The king of Song explained. When the white-hoofed shadow grows up, it'll have unparalleled strength. When it gallops, it'll be as fast as lightning. However, this isn't an ordinary white-hoofed shadow. Men. The king of Song beckoned outside. Soon, 2 guards from the king of Song's residence carried a huge metal basin over. The metal basin was filled with water, and it was more than a foot deep. It was clear that these things had been prepared beforehand. The stableman led the foal into the huge basin. The next moment, to Wang Chong's astonishment, the foal didn't sink into the water. Instead, it floated on the surface like a goose feather. Water ripples automatically spread out from beneath its feet, making the colt look even more spirited. How is this possible? Wang Chong was dumbfounded. Similarly, the surrounding Wang clan members were also dumbfounded. The weight of this foal was definitely not low, but when it stepped on the water, it was as light as a feather. It didn't sink at all. This was simply inconceivable. This is the white-hoofed shadow raised by the palace. It treads on water and crosses rivers. The experts in the palace have done a great deal of hybridization and improvement on them. Perhaps you'll discover even more things in the future. How about it? Do you like this gift? The king of Song shook his sleeves as he said proudly. I like it. Wang Chong hurriedly nodded. What a joke. There was no way he would refuse such a high-quality horse. There weren't many such good horses in the world. In his previous life, by the time he became the Grand Marshal of the world, these spirited horses would have long been dead, injured, or exhausted in the years of war. Thus, even though he was the Grand Marshal of the world, Wang Chong had no fate with these top-notch spirit horses. Chapter 181. Ha ha ha, a good horse, a good horse. Wang Chong was overjoyed. Since the king of Song had given it to him, Wang Chong did not stand on ceremony. He walked over and took the white-hoofed shadow from the coachman. Although Wang Chong had never raised a horse before, he knew that the best horses on the battlefield were raised from a young age. From the moment they were born, they would be carefully cared for and raised. Only this kind of horse would be connected to one's heart. On the battlefield, it would be able to save one's life, lead one to kill the enemy, and rescue one from an encirclement. Wang Chong led the colt down from the basin and stroked it. The white-hoofed shadow's fur was so smooth that it felt as if his hand wouldn't be able to stick to it. It felt as if even a drop of water would slide off. Young master, if you give it this handful of beans, it will recognize you as its master in the future, the coachman said. The coachman beside him, who was wearing a headgear, took out a handful of soybeans from the pouch on his waist. Wang Chong took them and fed them to the white-hoofed shadow. As expected, after the horse ate the beans, it looked at Wang Chong and its expression immediately became much more intimate. It even placed its head on Wang Chong's chest. In his previous life, he had been bathed in blood for decades, and a warhorse was his second life. Wang Chong felt an instinctive sense of closeness toward a warhorse. As he stroked the sleek colt, Wang Chong felt as if he had regained the feeling of a powerful army from his previous life. He felt an urge to let out a long roar. But fortunately, in front of the King of Song, Wang Chong managed to restrain himself. It's not easy to raise a good spirit horse. In the future, you will need to constantly massage it to loosen its bones and muscles. In addition, you will need to use origin energy to open up its meridians. I have a cultivation technique that I obtained from the palace, specially prepared for these spirit horses. It can increase their strength, speed, and endurance. Take it. With a shake of the King of Song's finger, a palm-sized square piece of paper immediately flew out. Thank you, Your Highness. Wang Chong chuckled and took the paper. Although it was just a small piece of paper, Wang Chong knew that this training method was no less valuable than the white-hoofed shadow. By the way, Your Highness. I also have something for Your Highness. Wang Chong suddenly thought of something and said. Oh. What is it? The King of Song raised his eyebrows and asked with great interest. Wang Chong didn't say much. He led the pony into the study and took out the wooden box that Yang Zhao had given him. This is King Qi's letter. Consort Taizhen really helped me. The King of Song looked at the letter in the box thoughtfully. Previously, it was because of Consort Taizhen that he fell out of favor, and now that he was reinstated, it was also because of Consort Taizhen. This left the King of Song with an indescribable feeling. This is probably the reason why Yang Zhao gave me this letter. Wang Chong nodded solemnly. Yang Zhao's letter wasn't for him, but for the King of Song. No matter what. At the very least, Consort Taizhen chose us and not King Qi and the Yao clan. At the very least, this is beneficial to us, isn't it? The King of Song chuckled as he folded the letter in his hand and kept it. At the same time, he also made up his mind. Deep into the night, the Wang family residence was much livelier than in the day. Other than Wang Chong's little uncle, who had to return to Tianzhu Mountain, and the old master and old madam of the Four Quarters Embassy, everyone in the Wang family residence was present. The friendship between the Song and Wang clan, which spanned several generations, had missed in the day. Naturally, they couldn't miss out on such an important show. The King of Song, Lu Ting, and the old butler were all gathered together. The group of people put together for large tables and placed 50 to 60 dishes on the table. They ate happily and enjoyed themselves to their heart's content. In the past few months, this was the happiest meal that Wang Chong had ever had. Your Highness, do you still remember the promise you made to me before I was sent to the imperial prison? When the banquet came to an end, just as the King of Song was about to leave, Wang Chong suddenly spoke up. Of course I remember. Speak, no matter what it is, I'll agree to it. King Song chuckled, a forthright expression on his face. Wang Chong was currently the most outstanding rising star and advisor of the younger generation of the Song and Wang clan. At the same time, he was also the future strategist that the King of Song had high hopes for. After the Consort Taizhen incident and the regional commanders incident, the King of Song was confident in Wang Chong's capabilities. I hope that Your Highness can transfer my big brother, Wang Fu, to the southwest of the Tang dynasty. If possible, transfer my father over as well. Wang Chong suddenly lowered his head and said earnestly. In the darkness of the night, the surroundings suddenly fell silent. Even the chirping of the cicadas had become much softer. Other than Wang Chong and the King of Song, there was no one else in the surroundings. Why? The King of Song stared at Wang Chong in astonishment. He didn't expect this to be the request of Wang Chong. Is this your big brother's wish? The King of Song's first reaction was that Wang Fu wanted to be transferred to the southwest. No. Wang Chong shook his head, an indescribable disappointment in the darkness. This is also why I hope that your highness can keep this a secret from my big brother. Right now, the entire empire's attention was focused on the north of the Yin Mountains, the increasingly powerful eastern and western Turkic Khaganates, the Annong Protectorate controlled by Zhang Shogui, and the Anxi Protectorate led by Gao Xianji. This was currently the most frequently fought front in the empire. But Wang Chong knew that in the future, the empire's most bitter, most intense, and most costly war would be in the southwest, not the north. This war would shake the foundation of the empire. Its effects would linger for decades to come. Wang Chong didn't know if he could stop this war. He could only do his utmost to take precautions and prepare in advance. In his last life, he hadn't been able to participate in this war, hadn't been able to contribute his meager strength. This was a deep regret in Wang Chong's heart. In this life, no matter what, Wang Chong wouldn't miss out on this opportunity. Wang Chong, I really don't understand you. Seeing that Wang Chong wasn't willing to say more, the King of Song could only shake his head. If anyone else had said this or made such a strange request, he wouldn't have cared or responded. But Wang Chong was different. In the past few months, the King of Song's greatest feeling was that Wang Chong's way of thinking was completely different from ordinary people. Asking consort Tai Zhen to intercede on his behalf and restore him to his post was something that others wouldn't even dare to dream of. But Wang Chong had done it. The King of Song didn't dare to use common sense to judge some of Wang Chong's requests. But don't worry. I'll do it for you. In the name of the Ministry of War, your elder brother won't be suspicious. But your elder brother wants to fight on the battlefield. Aren't you afraid that he'll be angry if you transfer him to the southwest? The King of Song joked. As a younger brother, Wang Chong was really bold to transfer his elder brother. There's a war in the southwest that he wants. Wang Chong said. Oh. The King of Song glanced at Wang Chong thoughtfully. But soon, he smiled, patted Wang Chong's shoulder, and walked toward Lu Ting in the distance. The two of them drove out of the Wang family's residence and disappeared into the night. With the departure of the King of Song, only the members of the Wang clan remained. Wang Chong glanced around and saw his cousin Wang Liang sitting alone under the eaves, munching on a blade of grass with a bored expression on his face. Recalling the request his big aunt and uncle had entrusted to him, Wang Chong immediately walked over to the other party. Cousin. Wang Chong sat down next to him. What is it? Wang Liang said absent-mindedly, as if he wasn't paying attention. Those who didn't know him might think that he didn't want to talk to him, but Wang Chong knew that his cousin's personality had always been like this. Cousin, it was aunt and uncle who asked me to come over. Wang Chong smiled. Humph, I already knew. Wang Liang said. He wasn't a fool. He already knew when Wang Chong talked to him. I heard that your wooden bird business failed and you paid back several hundred taels of gold. Wang Chong said. It was better to be direct with his cousin. Wang Chong had known him for 2 lifetimes, so he knew that he wasn't as dumb as he appeared. Humph, thank you. I heard that my father helped you with your business and made quite a bit of money. He helped me fill in this sum of money. As Wang Liang said this, a hint of sadness flitted through his eyes. He had been ambitious ever since he was a child, wanting to become a tycoon. Alas, his ambition was higher than his talent, and many of his small businesses had failed. You don't have to count this sum of money on me. I just wanted to ask you if you're interested in going to sea. Wang Chong smiled. Did my father ask you to do it again? Wang Liang said. He didn't like being arranged by his parents. That's not it. It's just that I have some things overseas that I need to help you retrieve. As Wang Chong spoke, he began to think about those precious treasures that had been exposed on the islands of the sea. The world's three great swords, the Wuxia steel sword, broadsword, the Malayan kris sword, and the Japanese samurai sword. Even though time and space had changed, and many things were different, some things were still the same. Wang Chong had already obtained the Wuxia steel sword, so Wang Chong subconsciously thought of the Malayan kris sword. The reason why the Malayan kris sword was famous wasn't because of how skilled the swordsmiths were, nor was it because of the advanced techniques used to forge the sword. Rather, it was because of the material used to forge the sword. Just like the Wuxia steel sword, the Malayan kris sword was also famous because of its material. However, unlike the Wuxia steel sword, the Wuxia steel sword was famous because it contained the world's sharpest ore, Hyderabad. The Malayan kris sword was famous because it also possessed the same sharpness and toughness, but this toughness came from beyond the heavens. The Malayan kris sword was forged from the incomparably precious meteoric iron. From the Philippine Islands to the long reefs of India, there was a large amount of meteoric iron. No one knew in what era they fell. For a long time, these things were treated as ordinary rocks, and no one cared about them. It wasn't until thousands of years later that they were discovered by chance and made into weapons. In this world, there was no Philippine Islands, and Wang Chong had never been out to sea, be it in his previous life or this one. But since the Hyderabad ore existed in this world, why couldn't the meteoric iron exist in this world? As long as there was the slightest possibility, it would be a huge fortune. Chapter 182. These were truly ownerless objects. There was no need to bid a high price, and there was no need to sign a contract. Wang Chong only needed to find them and bring them over. Wuxia steel swords could be the best weapons, and these meteorites, if fused with Xian iron, would become the toughest armor. Each suit of Xian iron fused with a piece of meteorite would become the sturdiest armor. The meteorites on these islands could definitely be used to forge thousands of sets of sturdy armor. And when these sturdy armors were combined with the armies of the Tang dynasty and his own Wuxia steel swords, they would become an invincible and unstoppable force. For Wang Chong, this was the plan he had come up with from the very beginning, and it was also the direction he had always wanted to advance Indiana. The only problem was that the ocean was filled with all sorts of phenomena. The violent waves and the vile weather were enormous factors that needed to be overcome. Besides this, Wang Chong also needed someone who understood the ocean, or at least had a spirit of adventure. Wang Chong could not possibly go by himself. He simply had no time to split himself. Thus, Wang Liang was the best choice for Wang Chong. So you want me to help you bring those stones back from overseas? Wang Liang asked suspiciously after listening to Wang Chong's rough introduction. Correct. Going overseas is very risky. The waves, the sea beasts, the weather, the direction, all of these are dangerous. The risks are great, and if you're not willing to go, I won't force you. But if you're willing, all the ships, guides, escorts, hired experts, food needed for the journey. I can arrange all of this for you. All the money needed will be on me. Wang Chong said. But do you know how much money this will cost? Wang Liang said. I do. Wang Chong chuckled. A trip like this would take a very long time. It was already quite good to be able to come back once every half a year. And the cost of buying the ships and all the other miscellaneous expenses would probably not even be enough to cover 300,000 or 400,000. Unless it was an aristocratic family that specialized in sailing, many aristocratic families would not be able to afford such expenses. But, I don't care. Wang Chong said. Are you serious? Wang Liang seriously said. Of course. Wang Chong nodded and said frankly, "We are relatives. How could I lie to you about this kind of thing? Let me think about it." Wang Liang's expression was a little panicked. Going to sea was something he had never thought about. In his entire life in the capital, he had never left this circle. He had never imagined that he would suddenly end up on a barren island tens of thousands of miles away. Wang Chong's words were too sudden. "Of course." Wang Chong smiled and didn't force her. "However, whether you agree or not, I hope you can discuss it with aunt and uncle before you make a decision." With that, Wang Chong stood up and walked into the house. "Wang Chong." But after walking for a while, cousin Wang Liang's voice came from behind him. Wang Chong turned his head and looked at him in surprise. He realized that cousin Wang Liang was looking at him in the darkness. His eyes were bright, and he was biting his lip as if he had come to some sort of decision. "I've thought it over. I promise you. I promise to help you find that meteoric metal." Wang Liang's voice seemed to be struggling with the first sentence, but by the end, his voice had become incomparably firm. It was like a butterfly finally breaking free of its cocoon. In the end, Wang Liang's mind yearned for the extraordinary. Grandeur, adventure, incomparable experience, and ambition, these were all things hidden deep in his soul. As he looked at Wang Liang under the eaves, Wang Chong's lips curled into a smile. In the blink of an eye, a day had passed. Although it had been a day since he had been released from prison, the effects of this matter were still far from over. Paying respects to young master. On the morning of the next day, a dense crowd of more than 100 boys and girls stood in the courtyard of the Wang clan, bowing to Wang Chong on the steps with deferential expressions. So many. Standing on the steps, Wang Chong was shocked to see these youths who weren't any younger than him. "Hee, didn't you say that you wanted to recruit some people? These fellows came here on their own accord." In the courtyard, Elder Yi, Duke of Hu, and the others stroked their beards as they chuckled gleefully. "Gongzi, we came here on our own accord. Gongzi, we came here on our own accord. It's our honor to serve Gongzi," that the youths spoke with incomparable reverence in their eyes. They secretly glanced at Wang Chong as though he was their idol. "Hee, the descendants of our 7 clans aren't the only ones here. The descendants of the other clans are here as well. You might not know this, but these youths view you as a hero. Even if you ask them to jump off a cliff, they wouldn't even bat an eyelid." Elder Yi whispered to Wang Chong with a chuckle that only Wang Chong could hear. There was no need for him to say it. Wang Chong could tell from the gazes of these youths. After spending 3 months in the imperial prison, Wang Chong didn't expect his influence to be so great among the descendants of his grandfather's old acquaintances. However, given the respect and reverence they were showing toward him, they wouldn't hesitate no matter what he asked them to do. But thinking about it, wasn't this what he wanted? Wang Chong knew that his grandfather's prestige and influence in the royal court was slowly adding an invisible halo to him, and this halo was swiftly taking effect. This was only the first batch. In the future, there would be more of them gathering under him. This was the strength of the prestigious clans. He was slowly bringing out the influence of the Wang clan. In the future, these people would be his first batch of loyal subordinates. With such thoughts in mind, Wang Chong took a step forward. This small movement immediately attracted the attention of everyone in the courtyard. Elder Yi, Duke of Hu, and the others also looked over curiously. "I believe that all of you should know why I was imprisoned in the imperial prison this time." Before nearly 100 unfamiliar faces, Wang Chong began his first speech to his first batch of subordinates. The human heart was a delicate thing. Wang Chong knew that these people had heard of him in the past. They had heard of this and that before. But in the end, they still had to see him with their own eyes. He had to convey his ideals to them personally. When we are successful, we will rule the world. When we are poor, we will only care about ourselves. Every one of us has the heart to help the world. Today, we lack the strength to do so, so we can only submit memorials and move our lips. In the future, I hope to lead all of you into the battlefield and use your flesh and blood to defend the Tang dynasty and this world. The empire is facing a huge crisis. The conflict between the Hu and Han this time is only the tip of the iceberg. There are still countless dangers hidden beneath the iceberg. Just because you can't see them doesn't mean that they don't exist. The rise and fall of the empire is everyone's responsibility. In this era, you can choose to be mediocre and passively accept it. You can also choose to fight bravely and defend this world with your own strength. This is the reason why I gathered all of you here. You won't be able to enjoy glory and wealth. But every single one of you is a scholar of the empire. Even if no one remembers you, this land and the Tang dynasty will always remember you. Wang Chang's voice was deafening. Not only the 100 boys and girls, even Old Man Yi, Duke of Hu, and the others were dumbfounded. They knew that Wang Chong was going to lecture them, but they didn't expect Wang Chong to say such things. After a short moment of shock, everyone felt deep respect for Wang Chong. At the same time, the gazes that the youths directed toward Wang Chong also grew more and more intense. In their eyes, Wang Chong was a true hero. Anyone who could make 100 conferred generals fight for him and make the officials and generals of the royal court fly into a rage for him could be considered as a true hero. Wang Chang's speech, along with his previous experiences and performance, only made the crowd more respectful and convinced of him. Chong Gongzi. I'm truly convinced. Of Duke Jiu's lineage, only he has the capability and courage to unite the hearts of the people. To be able to see such a talented person in our country in our twilight years. This is the fortune of our country, and it's also the fortune of us old bones. They heard Wang Chang's words clearly. Although they didn't understand why Wang Chang's words were suffused with a solemn and stirring flavor, whether it was the insight of, when one is successful, one can rule the world, and when one is poor, one can only care for oneself, or the bold words of every man is responsible for the rise and fall of the world, these novel words had struck a chord in the hearts of the elders. The more they liked Wang Chong, the more they wanted to protect him, help him, and protect him. Under Wang Chang's arrangements, the 100 young men and women were swiftly led by a guard of the Wang clan to the spirit vein. Looking at their backs, Wang Chong couldn't help but sigh. Elder Yi, Duke of Hu, and the others thought that his words were too tragic, and the young men and women didn't understand his words at all. However, Wang Chong knew that he was speaking from the bottom of his heart, and it was the tragic reality that everyone would have to face in the future. The danger that the Tang dynasty would face in the future was far greater than what everyone could imagine. At least half of those who appeared in this residence would have to crawl by the borders of the empire, slumbering for the rest of their lives. To benefit the country, one's life and death is at stake. How can one avoid it because of misfortune? Since one had chosen this path, there was no room for retreat. Regardless of whether it was him or them. As these thoughts flashed across Wang Chang's mind, he quickly buried them back into the depths of his heart. Let him in. Wang Chong waved his hand and said to the door. Not long after, a thin figure swayed as he staggered into the room. Chapter 183. Zhang Munian pays respect to Gongzi. Thank you for saving my life. Looking at Wang Chong in the courtyard, Zhang Munian's body trembled slightly. He bowed respectfully and bowed deeply. It's you. Wang Chong was delighted. Meng Long had only said that an old friend of his had been waiting outside for a long time, but he didn't mention that the other party was Zhang Munian. Mister, please come in. Even if Zhang Munian didn't appear, Wang Chong would still have gone to look for him personally. It wasn't to extort a favor from him, but for another matter. Now that Zhang Munian had come knocking on his door, Wang Chong had been spared a lot of effort. Wang Chong led Zhang Munian into the lounge and had the maid serve some fragrant tea before sitting down. Gongzi, please forgive me. I should have gone over to welcome you when you were released from prison yesterday. However, there were many noble figures in Gongzi's sect, so I didn't dare to be rude. Thus, I waited a day and came to thank you personally. Jean Mounion said. Huh, so you came yesterday. If Mr. had informed me yesterday, I would have surely gone out to welcome you personally. Hearing those words, Wang Chang's eyes lit up. Where is Mr. staying at the moment? This. In the maple tree culvert in the west of the city. Jean Mounion didn't expect Wang Chong to ask about this, and he hesitated for a moment before answering. What? Wang Chong was taken aback. Didn't Jean Mounion mean that he had been roaming the streets for the past few days? Didn't that eunuch Gao give you any money? He didn't. Instead, one of his guards gave me some silver coins. Jean Mounion said. Wang Chong was taken aback. That eunuch Gao wasn't just an authoritative figure, he was deeply favored by the emperor. At the same time, he was also a magnanimous merchant. Wang Chong thought that the other party would at least give Jean Mounion some money after he was released from prison. Nobles tend to be forgetful. Given the other party's standing, he might not have noticed such a small matter. Perhaps, he might even think that we are old acquaintances, and I have already made arrangements for him. I have been negligent. Wang Chong reacted immediately. Given that person's identity and standing, it was impossible for him to be bothered by a mere few thousand taels of gold. It was more likely that he had forgotten about it or misunderstood it. Do you have any plans for the future, sir? Wang Chong said. Jean Mounion fell silent. The questions asked by Wang Chong were difficult for him to answer. What kind of future does a man on death row have? This time, when he was released from prison, he originally wanted to return to his hometown. However, not to mention the long journey and the lack of travel expenses. Even if he went back, with his current reputation, would the villagers still accept him like before? Besides, how would he make a living? I haven't thought about it yet. I'll just take it one step at a time. Jean Mounion sighed. In prison, he had not hesitated, but after coming out, he really felt hesitant. How would he know what his future would be like? Sir, if you have nowhere to go, why don't you follow me? Wang Chong suddenly said. Gongzi, are you joking? Jean Mounion was taken aback for a moment before replying in self-mockery. How can an old man like me be of any value to Gongzi? Wang Chong chuckled. He knew that this request was too abrupt, and Jean Mounion didn't believe that he was serious. However, Wang Chong didn't argue with him. Instead, he picked up the fragrant tea on the table and sipped on it. I heard that Sir worked in the Ministry of Agriculture in the past. The reason for your imprisonment was due to embezzlement of 20,000 gold taels. Wang Chong put down the fragrant tea and said nonchalantly. Wang. Hearing those words, Jean Mounion's face warped, and his mind buzzed. This matter was the deepest secret in his heart. In the prison, even when he was being beaten up, Jean Mounion had never once mentioned this matter to Wang Chong. He didn't expect Wang Chong to see through him with a single sentence. You. How did you know? At this moment, Jean Mounion seemed to have changed into a completely different person. Staring at Wang Chong, his eyes widened in fear. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead, and he looked extremely uneasy. Don't worry, I don't have any intention of pressuring you. Wang Chong's expression was as calm as ever. A lowly agriculture official of low standing had embezzled 20,000 gold taels. Before Wang Chong made a name for himself, this was a huge sum even for a prestigious clan like the Wang clan, needless to say, others. For Jean Mounion to have embezzled so much money, those who didn't know him would think that he was a brazen scoundrel. However, to Wang Chong, the meaning behind this matter was completely different. If I'm not wrong, the 20,000 gold taels should have been used to compensate the farmers, right? Wang Chong's words were ordinary, and his voice wasn't loud or soft either. But in Jean Mounion's ears, it felt as though a bolt of lightning had struck him. How did you know? Those words left his mouth, and Zhang Munyan widened his eyes in shock. He stared at the young man before him as though he had seen a ghost. If Wang Chong had exposed the reason why he was imprisoned for the 20,000 gold taels and exposed his secret, he would have felt guilty. But now, Zhang Munyan was truly in disbelief. Even the Bureau of Punishments, which was responsible for investigating the matter, wasn't able to find out that he had distributed the gold taels to the farmers. No one knew where the 20,000 gold taels went. Yet, the young man before him was able to expose it for him. If it was in the middle of the night, Zhang Munyan would have been frightened out of his wits. As I thought. Ignoring the shocked Zhang Munyan, Wang Chong heaved a long sigh. Zhang Munyan couldn't possibly spend so much money alone. From the moment he saw the file, Wang Chong already knew what was going on. No one could embezzle 10,000 gold taels without leaving behind any traces that even the experts of the Bureau of Punishments wouldn't be able to find out. Unless, that person wasn't embezzling at all. There was a price to pay for any reform. The process of reform was filled with twists and turns, and it was destined that one would have to pay a huge price. There would be many failures along the way before one could find the correct path. In this world, other than Wang Chong himself, probably even Zhang Munyan himself didn't know the significance of the experiments he had been secretly conducting in the name of the government over the past few decades. In Wang Chong's plan, Zhang Munyan was a crucial link. His importance far surpassed that of the Hyderabad ores or the meteorites on the islands. Even the great yin-yang heaven creation art and art of God and demon obliteration couldn't compare to it. Food was the most important thing to the people. In this world of martial arts, everyone was pursuing power, status, wealth, reputation, and influence. Yet, other than Wang Chong, no one knew that there was another thing that far surpassed all wealth, status, power, and influence. It was inconspicuous, but it was the foundation of this world. It was food. How long would it take for the most powerful empire to fall from the glorious peak of having a luxurious life to the point of eating grass roots and tree bark? 10 years? 20 years? 50 years? 100 years? None of them. The real answer was a mere 2 years. This was a fact that Wang Chong had witnessed with his own eyes. Wang Chong had experienced the splendor of the Great Tang, but he had also seen its decline, and its miserable state of cannibalism. To those who lived in this world, this was an indescribable tragedy. When the Wang clan fell, the Wang clan wandered the world alone. Wang Chong would often go hungry for 2 to 3 days, and sometimes even longer. In those lonely days, Wang Chong had witnessed the sight of starving corpses strewn all over the ground. And Wang Chong's mother was the last person to fall into his embrace, her body emaciated. That moment was something that Wang Chong would never forget. Food was the most important thing to the people. No matter what time and space, this was a theme that would never change. When Wang Shichong and Li Shimin fought, the palace in Luoyang was filled with mountains of silk. Silk was the most valuable wealth, and the emperor rewarded his ministers with silk. But because there was no food in the city, the army starved and lost to Li Shimin. In Wang Chong's memory from another time and space, the year 755 was still peaceful and prosperous during the Tianbao era. When Tang Minghuang went to the warehouse to check, all the precious items, weapons, and food were still piled up like mountains. And in 759, Du Fu wrote 3 officials and 3 farewells. Don't say that the wine tastes thin, and the millet fields are unplowed. Once war came, no one would farm the fields, and food would become the biggest problem. Emperor Wu of the Han dynasty had many military achievements. He conquered the Xiongnu, pacified the western regions, and conquered Jiaoji. But because of the war, many people died, and the fields were unplowed. This led to the decline of the Han dynasty. In history, he was charged with the crime of using the military to build up power. Sometimes, war wasn't just a competition of military strength, equipment, and morale. There was also food. Wang Chong didn't think that Emperor Wu of the Han dynasty was wrong to use the military to build up power. However, he was wrong to not leave enough manpower to cultivate food. As long as there was sufficient food, the population would be able to flourish. Even if the population was depleted in war, there would still be more soldiers to replenish it. Emperor Wu of the Han dynasty didn't see this point, and that was why he was charged with using the military to build up power. The Tang dynasty faced enemies from all directions: the Eastern and Western Turkic Khaganate, the Uzun Empire, the Goguryeo Empire, the Abbasid Caliphate, Irai Mengshizhao. All of their enemies were fully fledged. No one knew better than Wang Chong how frequent wars the Tang dynasty would face in the future. In these frequent and drawn-out wars, those who possessed food would have hope, and those who possessed food would have a future. In this empire, there was no one who held more weight than Zhang Munyan. And there was no one who contributed more to the empire than Zhang Munyan. When Wang Chong said before Gao Lishir that Zhang Munyan was beneficial to the Tang dynasty and the empire, he wasn't spouting nonsense. This person held the future of the empire in his hands. Even though he knew nothing about it. These thoughts flashed across Wang Chong's mind, and he soon calmed down. Mr. Zhang, if I were to say that I would provide you with sufficient funds, standing, and research facilities, what do you think? Wang Chong looked at Zhang Munyan and suddenly asked. Chapter 184. Gong Gong. Gongzi, are you serious? Zhang Munyan finally lost his composure. The reason why he was imprisoned and embezzled more than 20,000 gold taels was because there was no one who could support him. If he had sufficient wealth and authority, how could he have ended up in such a state? To Zhang Munyan, Wang Chong's suggestion moved him greatly. In fact, it instantly overcame the unease he felt from having his secret exposed. Of course. If not to help you, I wouldn't have saved you in the first place. Wang Chong said impassively. Be it in his previous life or this one, there weren't many rumors about Zhang Munyan. Wang Chong only knew that some of the paddy crops that he created after his death had slowly spread. Even though he wasn't able to change the fate of the Central Plains or the Tang dynasty, at the very least, Wang Chong knew that there was a person named Zhang Munyan who had been contributing to the Central Plains with his own strength. But at the very least, Wang Chong knew that there was a person named Zhang Munyan who was silently contributing his strength to the nation. But at the very least, Wang Chong knew that there was a person named Zhang Munyan who had been contributing to the Central Plains with his own strength. But to this world, their contributions were immense. From Shang to Xia, Zhou to Han, and finally Sui and Tang, the reason why humans were able to break away from hunting and increase their population was due to people like Zhang Munyan. It was their silent contributions that created the current Central Plains. Xia's grain production exceeded Shang's, Zhou's exceeded Xia's, and Han's exceeded Zhou's. By the time the Tang dynasty came into power, it had already far surpassed any of the previous dynasties. Just that, to Wang Chong, this bit of grain production was far from enough. It was far from enough to support the rapidly expanding Central Plains. Wang Chong's goal was to raise the grain production of the Central Plains to a whole new level. It was impossible for Wang Chong to achieve this with just his martial arts. There was nothing in this world that could achieve this. Wang Chong could only rely on his knowledge and experience from the other world. Great! Wang Gongzi, as long as you can give me sufficient support. I will definitely be able to breed a grain with a higher yield than what we have now. On the other hand, Zhang Munyan didn't think too much into it. He had no idea what Wang Chong was up to. Hearing that he was truly willing to support her, she was incomparably excited. Mr. Zhang. As Wang Chong poured a cup of tea for Zhang Munyan, he pondered over how he should break the news to him. You've worked in the Ministry of Agriculture for so long, I'm not sure if you've noticed. Some grains had a very high yield per plant. Is it even more productive than other grains? Of course. Taken aback, Zhang Munyan was taken aback. Wang Chong, a young master from a wealthy family, actually knew about grains. However, when he thought about how Wang Chong was willing to support him, he naturally had some understanding. Our Ministry of Agriculture's job is to find these high-yielding plants. Then, he would collect their seeds and think of ways to expand their cultivation. But it was useless. When these seeds were found, they might have a high yield. But when we planted it, it became a very ordinary plant. Some crops don't even bear fruit. Out of 100,000 experiments, it's already not bad if we can find a single high-yielding crop and maintain it. Throughout the generations, the mission of the Ministry of Agriculture was to search the paddy fields one by one. Through the vast field of paddy fields, they had to search for those that had a high yield. However, due to the uncertainties in the genetics of grains, the first generation of a crop might have a high yield, the second generation would have a high yield, and the third generation would have a low yield. Perhaps, it might only be the fourth generation that the crop would have a high yield again. But that would be meaningless. After all, when the yield was low, people might have already starved to death. It would already be fortunate for the fourth generation to have a high yield again. From this, it could be imagined how difficult it was for the Ministry of Agriculture to filter out the seeds. Jean Mounian had grown up in the fields, and under the influence of his family, he had devoted his entire life to filtering out the seeds. Because of this, he was imprisoned and nearly lost his life. So the gold that disappeared was used by you to subsidize the farmers there, right? Wang Chong said. Yes. Before Wang Chong, there was no need for Jean Mounian to hide the truth. There was a huge risk involved in the filtering of the seeds. The farmers who planted their own paddy fields only to have a low yield or even no harvest at all had to be compensated. Only then could the experiment continue. Jean Mounian's 20,000 gold taels wasn't spent in a single day. Unknowingly, it had been spent bit by bit over the past 20 years. All of the gold was used to subsidize the farmers. Mr. Zhang, have you ever thought about those high-yielding crops? Why are some of them able to maintain their yield while others can't? Wang Chong pondered as he carefully imparted his opinion to Jean Mounian. Ah! Jean Mounian was taken aback. He had never thought about this before. His filtering work wasn't any different from the others. He was already used to the instability of the crop's yield generation after generation. He had never thought about why or what the problem was. I've never thought about it before. Jean Mounian shook his head. This was the first time someone had raised this question to him. Then, Mr. Zhang, have you ever thought about the possibility that these grains might be similar to humans? There's a male sterile line and a male maintainer line. This would explain why a high-yielding crop might not reap a single harvest the next year. Wang Chong finally revealed his opinion. Jean Mounian stared at the young man before him as though he had seen a ghost. He had never heard of such a theory in his entire life before. You must be joking to know that plants could be divided into males and females. However, Wang Chong's words had opened up his train of thought. Furthermore, it wasn't entirely unreasonable. This was indeed a brand new way of thinking in the filtering of paddy fields. I've never thought about it before. Jean Mounian fell into deep contemplation. He didn't reject Wang Chong's theory. Whoosh! Wang Chong had been staring at Jean Mounian's eyes the entire time. Upon seeing that the other party didn't reject his suggestion, he heaved a long sigh of relief. It was a brand new theory, a theory that was ahead of its time. The biggest problem was that it could not be accepted by others. Clearly, Jean Mounian wasn't such a person. He had found the right person. Mr. Zhang, I'm thinking that if we can find the male sterile line and maintainer line of this crop and differentiate them separately, wouldn't it be helpful for future planting and seed production? Besides, paddy fields are different from humans. Humans have male and female, but the male and female of paddy fields might not be the same as humans. Since there's a male sterile line, perhaps there's a recovery line that can turn these paddy fields back into maintainer lines. Wang Chong finally revealed his three systems method of paddy fields. In the other world, the three systems method of paddy fields was the essence of hybrid rice. Even though it was just a theory, its effects were epoch-making. At times, only by knowing the direction could one exert the right effort. If one were to face the ground, it was only a matter of time before one found water. On the other hand, if one were to dig a well in the sky, one could forget about drinking water for the rest of one's life. Wang Chong didn't have any hybrid rice, so he couldn't provide any seeds. As for the problem of farming and filtering, Wang Chong knew nothing about it. And the three systems method of paddy fields was all that Wang Chong knew. Left with no other choice, Wang Chong could only find a way to nurture a high-yielding hybrid rice in this world bit by bit. And Zhang Munian was the best candidate that Wang Chong could think of to accomplish all of this. As long as Zhang Munian could find three different types of paddy fields, the quality of the food of the Tang dynasty would soar. Food is the heaven of the people. This is the foundation of the future. Regardless of whether it was the continuous wars or the fight against the powerful foreign invaders, these were the foundations that Wang Chong relied on. I need to think about it carefully. Gongzi's words are truly unheard of. I've never heard of such a concept in my entire life. However, I'm willing to give it a try. Zhang Munian said gravely. Wang Chong's three systems method of paddy fields made his heart pound in agitation. If he could figure out why the high-yielding properties of paddy fields couldn't be maintained, he might just be able to create a true high-yielding paddy field. Gongzi, can you give me a plot of land? I'm willing to do my best to give it a try. Zhang Munian lifted his head, and a bizarre glint flashed across his eyes. Ha ha ha, of course. However, it won't be here, but somewhere else. I've already arranged the location for you. That will be the best place for you to conduct your experiments. Wang Chong smiled. Oh. Zhang Munian lifted his head in astonishment. May I know which place Gongzi is referring to? Jiaoji. Wang Chong smiled. The paddy fields in Jiaoji had 3 harvests in a year. Furthermore, there was a huge amount of manpower there. If Zhang Munian wanted to conduct his experiments on paddy fields, that would be the best place. Furthermore, 3 harvests in a year would shorten the time required for Zhang Munian to conduct his experiments on hybrid rice in the shortest time possible. Zhang Munian soon left. Along with him were 100,000 gold taels and 50 guards that Wang Chong had mobilized from Big Uncle Wang Zhen, the Wang clan, Elder Yi, and Duke of Hu. The group of people didn't alert anyone, and they quietly headed towards the south. At the same time, the 2 letters Wang Chong wrote had also reached the hands of Big Uncle Wang Zhen and the King of Song, Li Qingqi. For a small matter like demarcating a plot of land in Jiaoji for Zhang Munian to conduct his experiments, Big Uncle Wang Zhen and the King of Song could handle it. The Yao clan and King Qi probably wouldn't care about something as distant as Jiaoji. I've already given you all that I can. Whether the Tang dynasty will be able to survive the calamity will depend on you. Sitting in the study, gazing in the direction where Zhang Munian left, Wang Chong muttered to himself. No one knew better than him whether the Tang dynasty would be able to survive the calamity, and whether the Central Plains would be able to survive wasn't dependent on him. Rather, it was on a 50-year-old agriculture official. Chapter 185. After settling the matter regarding Zhang Munian, Wang Chong allocated a huge sum of several 100,000 gold taels to cousin Wang Liang for him to purchase a fleet of ships, as well as to recruit sailors and soldiers. With the contract he had with the Zhang clan, Wang Chong was able to afford this sum of money. It's about time for me to take a look at the royal palace. After everything was settled, Wang Chong sighed deeply before getting onto the carriage heading toward the royal palace. At the entrance of the royal palace, an imperial army member was already waiting for him. Follow me. Without saying a word, the imperial guard led Wang Chong to and fro through the winding corridors of the royal palace. After an unknown period of time, an underground entrance appeared before Wang Chong. Above the entrance, there were only two words: Death Prison. The words were mottled, and the paint was peeling. At the entrance, 12 muscular chamberlains of imperial insignia stood in a straight line, guarding the entrance expressionlessly, reminiscent of demonic gods. This was the Death Prison. The prisons of the royal palace were divided into the Imperial Prison and Death Prison. The most serious criminals were locked in the Imperial Prison, and the Holy Emperor would judge their life and death. Most of them would find it hard to get out. On the other hand, the prisoners in the Death Prison were slightly lighter. Wang Chong's second brother, Wang Bei, was locked in the Death Prison. Sitting in the carriage, Wang Chong gazed through the window at the entrance of the Death Prison guarded by the 12 black-armored chamberlains of insignia, and he heaved a long sigh. Of the 4 siblings of the Wang clan, the one who was closest to Wang Chong wasn't his eldest brother, Wang Fu, nor his youngest sister, Wang Xiaoyao, but his second brother, Wang Bei. His eldest brother, Wang Fu, was much older than him, and he had joined the military a long time ago. The one who had grown up with him was his second brother, Wang Bei. But as they grew older, not only did the relationship between the two of them not improve, it even grew more distant. This was a deep regret for Wang Chong. Wang Chong knew why, and it was precisely because he knew that he felt even more regretful. In this Kunwa training camp, if there was one person that Wang Chong wanted to see the most, then it had to be his second brother, Wang Hua. "Open it for me." Alighting from the carriage, Wang Chong took out a token and waved it in front of the 12 black-armored chamberlains of insignia. This was the waist token of the King of Song. With this token, Wang Chong would be able to access most of the places in the royal palace. Boom! After glancing at Wang Chong's waist token, one of the black-armored chamberlains of imperial insignia slowly opened the door. Buzz! Cold air gurgled, and a gust of black and cold underground mist surged up from the ground along with the airflow. Wang Chong frowned slightly and stepped into the underground tunnel. It was very quiet in the underground tunnel. Walking inside, Wang Chong could hear his own clear footsteps. In a special cell, Wang Chong finally met his second brother. This was a specially made cell, and the space was much larger than any other cell. Its bars and pillars were all as thick as the mouth of a bull, and they were all made of deep-sea mystic iron with inscriptions. And in the center of this cell, a thin figure was sitting cross-legged and motionless, looking like he had been tortured. His hair was disheveled, and his eyes were sunken. His limbs and torso were bound by a total of 5 thick chains. Like a spider's web, they crisscrossed and locked him down from all directions. This was his second brother, Wang Hua. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, Wang Chong would not have believed that this thin figure before him was the arrogant and domineering second brother of his memories. "Second brother, I'm here. I'm sorry that I only came to see you now." As he gazed at the disheveled and tortured figure in the cell, Wang Chong suddenly felt an unbearable pain in his heart. This wasn't how his second brother should look like. This dark and damp prison was definitely not a world that belonged to him. The cell was silent. Other than Wang Chong's voice, there was no reply. The figure in the cell didn't move, as if he couldn't hear anything. "Second brother, we all missed you. Big brother missed you, little sister missed you, mother and I missed you too. Come out, second brother. You don't belong here." Wang Chong sighed. The death cell was a place to imprison prisoners, but Wang Chong knew that his second brother was completely different from these people. Because he had imprisoned himself here. Everyone in the Wang clan who had contracted the Berserker syndrome could freely enter the death cell. This was a favor that the Holy Emperor had bestowed upon his grandfather. It had been specially requested by his grandfather after he had become a dragon. This expensive cell had been specially constructed by the Holy Emperor. All descendants of the Wang clan who had contracted the Berserker syndrome could enter and imprison themselves. For this generation, it fell to second brother Wang Bei. He had been exiled, and other than himself, no one could let him out. The cell was silent, not a single sound could be heard. Sighing, Wang Chong continued, "That's right. Second brother, if you're doing this for the eldest son of Duke Sheng, then there's no need. He has already recovered, he's not dead. Do you think I'm like this because of Marquis Zheng?" A cold voice suddenly echoed from the cell, interrupting Wang Chong's words. At some point, Wang Bei had raised his head, and his bloodshot eyes were staring coldly at Wang Chong through the bars. Second brother. Wang Chong was taken aback, and then he was overjoyed. "You're finally willing to speak to me. Do you really think that I'm here because of him?" Wang Bei seemed to be oblivious to Wang Chong's words. He continued to stare at Wang Chong emotionlessly. "Scram. Scram right now. I don't need you to see me, and I don't need anyone to see me. Scram." His final word was like a thunderclap, and a furious gale swept through the death cell. Even with Wang Chong's origin energy tier 7 cultivation, might of the barbaric god, and the serpent dragon bone, he was still forced to retreat. Even though he was suffering from the berserker syndrome, Wang Chong's second brother Wang Bei was definitely one of the top experts in the capital. The furious gale left just as quickly as it came. In just a few moments, the death cell had calmed down once more. Wang Bei sat cross-legged in the prison, regaining his calm. "Second brother, since it's not because of Marquis Zheng, why aren't you leaving?" Wang Chong stared at the figure in the cell, but he didn't back down. He came here to change a matter, and before he was done, he wouldn't leave. Wang Bei remained motionless, as if he hadn't heard Wang Chong's voice. But Wang Chong didn't give up. "Given your abilities, this place isn't enough to keep you here. It's been more than half a year since you came here. Do you intend to stay here for the rest of your life?" As Wang Chong spoke, he began to walk toward the bars of the cell. "Don't force me to make a move on you. Get out, right now." Wang Bei finally reacted. He stretched out a hand and pointed toward the exit of the death cell, and his voice was cold. "Second brother, the berserker syndrome isn't impossible to overcome. Given your abilities." "Berserker syndrome. Ha ha ha, you're talking to me about the berserker syndrome. Do you know what the berserker syndrome is?" Rumble. The chains slid and clattered. Amidst the violent vibrations, a strong sense of danger suddenly rose in Wang Chong's heart. Boom! Amidst the clattering of metal, a thin face, pale skin, and bloodshot eyes suddenly appeared in Wang Chong's vision, exuding an enormous killing intent. This sudden turn of events was cold, icy, and bloodshot, and filled with killing intent. It was enough to give people nightmares. Even those with extraordinary willpower would tremble in fear and stagger back when stared at by these eyes, but Wang Chong didn't. Wang Chong stared into those demonic and callous eyes, brimming with bloodlust and bloodlust. Their gazes met as they stood there, motionless, not even the slightest intention of retreating. "This time, I definitely won't retreat." As Wang Chong gazed at those red and bloodshot eyes and that face that had turned pale from not seeing the sun for so long, a deep sorrow flitted through his eyes. Wang Chong was here to atone for his sins. In truth, Wang Chong already knew why second brother Wang Bei had exiled himself here. The berserker syndrome was a curse carried by the members of the Wang clan. Once it flared up, they wouldn't recognize even their own kin. Second brother was afraid of harming his family, afraid of harming Wang Chong and his little sister, so he feigned coldness and sealed his heart, causing Wang Chong and his little sister to distance themselves from him. He wanted to create a rift between them so that Wang Chong would distance himself from him. The pain of the berserker syndrome wasn't frightening, nor was the feeling of loneliness. What truly hurt second brother was the fear of his family. It was a pity that Wang Chong didn't know this in his previous life. The first time Wang Chong saw him after he flared up, he staggered back. That was when he was young. It was then that he forever distanced himself from Wang Chong. In his memory, the person who was closest to him, the person who would carry him on his shoulders on snowy days, had disappeared. In his place was the cold, distant Wang Bei who suffered from the berserker syndrome. And the second time was right here. It was right before this pale face and bloodshot eyes that Wang Chong personally sent him into the abyss. He had lost this second brother for good. That small step back had completely severed him. It had also made Wang Chong regret it for the rest of his life. There were many things that could only be understood in the past. There was no way to make up for the mistakes of his previous life. In this life, no matter what, Wang Chong would never back down. Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you? Wang Bei looked at the calm-looking Wang Chong by the fence and was stunned. Why should I be afraid? You are my second brother. You are now, you were in the past, you will be in the future, and you will be forever. I'll be afraid of anyone, but I won't be afraid of my second brother. Through the fence, Wang Chong spoke calmly without the slightest hint of evasion. These were Wang Chong's heartfelt words. In this life, no matter what, he wouldn't let his second brother leave. Although the berserker syndrome was an incurable disease, Wang Chong was willing to do his best to save his second brother. Wang Bei was stunned. A trace of pain and fear suddenly flashed across his bloodshot eyes. His footsteps staggered, and he abruptly let go of the fence and retreated. Go. 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 I don't want to see you, leave this place. This isn't a place you should be. Wang Bei's hair was disheveled, and his back was facing Wang Chong. He waved his hands as he tried to expel Wang Bei, his voice filled with intense pain. Seeing his second brother's appearance, Wang Chong's heart violently twitched. However, Wang Chong didn't show it on his face. Second brother, there's nothing that can't be defeated. The berserker syndrome is inherited through the bloodline, not through the mind. I hope that you will remember these words, don't be a slave to your heart. Use your mind and your will to defeat the berserker syndrome in your bloodline. There's nothing that our Wang clan can't defeat. We definitely won't be controlled by the berserker syndrome. I believe in you. Wang Chong said in a low voice. In the prison, when Wang Bei heard the words don't be a slave to your heart, his body suddenly trembled, but he quickly calmed down. Go, go, don't disturb me anymore. Wang Bei waved his hands. Wang Chong looked at Wang Bei's back, a trace of sadness flashing across his eyes. Second brother, I actually came here this time to say goodbye to you. I'm going to join the Kunwa training camp soon. Time doesn't wait for me. The Tang dynasty is facing many dangers, and I might have to enter the battlefield soon. There are some things that I won't tell others, but I can tell you. In the future, the great Tang will be plunged into chaos. I don't know if my plan will succeed. Maybe it will fail. But even if I die on the battlefield, I won't regret it. Just as Wang Chong said these words, the Stone of Destiny's voice sounded in his mind. Warning, the host is attempting to cross the boundary. 10 destiny energy has been deducted. If there's a second time, kill. An intense pain came from every part of his body. Wang Chong's face paled, and his hands began to twitch in his sleeves. But Wang Chong didn't show it, instead continuing to speak. Second brother, I need your help. If it's possible, leave this place and come help me. Although the berserker syndrome is a hindrance in the capital, it isn't a problem on the battlefield. I hope that you can help me. After saying these words, Wang Chong turned and walked out. Behind him, Wang Bei remained motionless. Only when Wang Chong disappeared into the corridor did he turn his head and look at Wang Chong's back, a complicated expression in his eyes. Little brother. Chapter 186. Early in the morning, Wang Chong sat cross-legged on the floor of his bedroom, motionless. On his abdomen, there were 2 balls of light, one large and one small, one gold and one silver. They looked like two miniature suns and moons. The suns and moons trembled slightly, attracting each other. Under the influence of the two balls of light, the surrounding origin energy of the world surged towards Wang Chong and entered his body. This was the little yin-yang art that Wang Chong had just learned. Putting aside the cultivation aspect of this art, the speed at which he absorbed origin energy from the world was much faster. Wang Chong originally cultivated the might of the barbaric god, and now that he had this little yin-yang art, his strength naturally grew even faster. As time passed, Wang Chong sat on the floor motionlessly, his aura growing stronger and stronger. After an unknown period of time, Wang. Suddenly, as if a gust of wind had passed through, a vast energy distorted the void and flew through the study like a steaming mirror. Wang Chong's body also began to ripple and distort in the steam. Congratulations, host, for successfully overcoming the second world constraint. Consumed 30 points of destiny energy. Remaining destiny energy, 15 points. Next world constraint, 6 months later. Consumed 40 points of destiny energy. The vast energy disappeared from the room, and at the same time, the stone of destiny's voice sounded in Wang Chong's ears. Huff. Wang Chong let out a long sigh and opened his eyes, his body drenched in sweat. I've survived another tribulation. The world shackle was said to last for 3 months, but it was actually between 3 to 4 months. However, even though he had experienced it once, it was still not enough. However, even though he had already experienced it once, Wang Chong still felt like a nightmare. However, even though his body was sore and his stamina was exhausted, there were still benefits. But it wasn't as if there were no benefits. After resisting the world constraint, Wang Chong could clearly sense that his bones had become more compact, and his muscles and tendons had become more resilient and powerful. Not only that, Wang Chong could also clearly feel that a portion of the power had turned into yuan qi and was pouring into his meridians. Just this little bit of power was equivalent to 3 months of bitter cultivation. Compared to before the world shackles, his power had clearly increased by quite a bit. The world bind's consumption is increasing. The first time it was 20 points, the second time it reached 30 points, and the fourth time it reached 40 points. Wang Chong felt a lingering fear when he thought of this. If not for the fact that he had unintentionally obtained 50 destiny energy from the consort Taizhen incident and the regional commander's incident, he would have been killed long ago. Moreover, the power of the world constraint grew stronger each time. The second time was much stronger than the first. These things couldn't be easily resisted. Fortunately, the time interval is getting longer and longer. The first time is 1 month, the second time is 3 months, and the third time is 6 months. Otherwise, I really wouldn't have been able to persist. Wang Chong thought to himself, feeling the heavy pressure. After not acting up for a few months, he had almost forgotten about the world constraint. But this time, Wang Chong was beaten back to his original state. If he didn't have enough destiny energy, he would probably be killed very quickly. However, 6 months is enough. It's enough to do a lot of things. Wang Chong thought to himself and quickly calmed down. Changing fate was not that simple. The greater the change in fate, the more people changed, and the wider the scope, the greater the world constraint. With regards to this result, Wang Chong was not surprised. Moreover, 6 months was a very long time. Kind. After sitting cross-legged on the ground for a moment to recover his strength, Wang Chong suddenly thought of something and pulled out a sword from his waist. This sword was not Wang Chong's famous wood steel sword, but a meter-long sword. Its blade was crimson, and dark inscriptions resembled the scales of a snake could be seen on its surface. The sword didn't look as sharp as the wood steel sword, but it had a unique aura. Is this the little yin-yang sword? Wang Chong looked at the sword in his hand and blinked. A strange light flashed in his eyes. This sword was sent by Wang Chong's master on the Spirit Vein Mountain, the evil emperor, after learning that Wang Chong had completed the little yin-yang art. The martial arts of the demonic Emperor Old Man's lineage were different from ordinary martial arts. Ordinary martial arts, as long as one trained diligently, would definitely be able to reach a higher realm. But the little yin-yang art was different. Only by using the little yin-yang art to continuously absorb the opponent's energy could the little yin-yang art be refined and reach a higher realm. In other words, it was to kill. This was also the reason why the evil emperor was known as the evil path, and why he had angered so many people in the world of sex, even causing him to be hunted down by so many. The level of the little yin-yang art was too low, so it could only absorb the energy of opponents much weaker than itself. Wang Chang's realm could only be that of a tiger, leopard, or cat. This was why the evil emperor's faction had invented the little yin-yang sword. The little yin-yang sword can only help you absorb the last bit of energy of your opponent when they are on the brink of death or extremely weak. Just as you said, the little yin-yang sword is used for righteousness, and when used for evil, it is evil. You are the son of a duke, so you have to be wary of your identity. As for what you should do, I won't tell you. You can decide for yourself. These words had not been sent by the demonic Emperor Old Man, but in a short letter. The cultivation techniques of the evil path were unique and difficult for others to accept. Especially this kind of killing technique, it was even more difficult for people to accept it. In the evil emperor's view, given that Wang Chong was from a family of ministers and generals, it would be inappropriate for him to learn this martial art. However, the evil emperor was overthinking things when it came to Wang Chong. The little yin-yang art is most suitable not for sex or personal fights. It is for the battlefield. This martial art can only be accumulated quickly on the battlefield and reach an extremely high level in a short period of time. Master, you're overthinking things. Wang Chong said calmly. His fingers slowly brushed across the crimson blade, emitting a clear hum. It was true that the little yin-yang art and the great yin-yang heaven creation art were evil martial arts, but from the start, Wang Chong had never intended them to be used to make a name for himself, but to be used on the battlefield. The problems that his master, the evil emperor, worried about were non-existent to Wang Chong. Da. Just as Wang Chong was deep in thought, the sound of hooves galloping and the neighing of warhorses could be heard. Ha, Wang Chong, are you ready? The training camp is about to begin. Wei Hao's voice was full of vigor, and it reverberated throughout the Wang family residence. It's here. With a smile, Wang Chong sheathed the little yin-yang sword and stood up. After such a long time, the most important event in the history of the Great Tang Dynasty finally happened. The three great training camps, Kunwu, Shenwei, and Longwei, had finally begun. Today was the day they would officially open. After settling the matters on hand, Wang Chong made an appointment with Wei Hao to set off together with him today. After bathing and changing into a clean set of clothes, he put on a golden crown and pinned it with a hairpin. Feeling refreshed, Wang Chong walked out of the room dressed in a loose robe, looking like a dashing, elegant, and carefree person. Neigh. As soon as Wang Chong walked out of the room, the neighing of a young steed sounded, and with a flash of light, a floating shadow leaped into his embrace. The indigo colt chewed on the leaves that it had torn from the courtyard, and its mane danced in the wind as it licked Wang Chong affectionately. Wang Chong reacted quickly. He took out a cloth pouch from his waist and took out a handful of soybeans. Holding them in his hands, he fed it to the colt personally. A spirit colt was indeed a spirit colt. In just 2 short days, this white-hoofed shadow raised in the palace had already begun to treat Wang Chong as its true master. And Wang Chong also treated it as a human. Instead of locking it in the stable, he placed it in the courtyard and allowed it to run freely, go wherever it wanted, and eat whatever it wanted. This would make the colt more intelligent, and it would also aid its growth. Little shadow. Let's go, I'll bring you to a bigger place today. After the colt finished eating the soybeans in its hands, Wang Chong patted its neck and led it forward. At the entrance of the Wang family residence, a row of people was already waiting. Young master. Upon seeing Wang Chong, Shen Hai, Meng Long, Tuoba Guiyuan, Li Zhuxin, and Mayase Mayaka immediately lowered their heads and bowed. Even though Li Zhuxin didn't lower his head, he still nodded slightly in acknowledgement. Let's go. Wang Chong smiled. Passing through the gates, a few majestic war steeds were waiting outside. Wei Hao, along with a group of followers, sat on the backs of the steeds, looking spirited. On the other side, Zhao Jingdian was leading a few war steeds, waiting for Wang Chong. Beside him were Elder Yi, Duke of Hu, and the others. Today was the opening of the 3 great training camps, and this was Wang Chong's first time joining the army. Thus, those who received the news had already rushed over to send him off. Chonger, this is your first time joining the army. Mother isn't around, so you have to learn how to take care of yourself. The first madam stood by the door with reddened eyes, and she seemed a little sad. Even though Wang Chong had yet to officially join the army and was only participating in the training camp, this was the first time Wang Chong had left his side. The young bird had grown up, and it was finally time for it to enter a wider world. Mother, don't worry. I will. Wang Chong smiled. Humph, brother, I heard that the people there are formidable. If they dare to bully you, tell me, and I'll deal with them for you. The Wang family's little sister leaned into her mother's embrace, puffed up her cheeks, and waved her little fists around. Just like the vast crane pavilion, she looked as though she was going to stand up for Wang Chong. Wang Chong chuckled inside. Right now, only his little sister still treated him as the weak brother from before. Little sister, I understand. Humph, don't pinch my nose. Otherwise, I won't be happy. That seeing how his little sister was about to fly into a rage, Wang Chong burst into laughter. Retreating, he pulled open the distance between them. Mother, little sister, and elders, I'll be leaving first. After bidding farewell to everyone, Wang Chong suddenly leaped onto his steed and left with Li Zhuxin, Mayase Mayaka, Wei Hao, and Zhao Jingdian. Chapter 187. The capital was bustling with people, and one cavalry after another was rushing out from the east, west, and south gates of the capital. These cavalrymen weren't from the capital's imperial army or the border army, but high-spirited scions of the capital. The scions of nobles, descendants of generals, scions of prestigious clans. There were all kinds of people on horseback. Ha ha ha, it sure is lively. Wei Hao sat on his horse and watched the scene from its back. He laughed excitedly and said, that's right. Wang Chong, look, there are so many people here. Wang Chong nodded, but his eyebrows indiscernibly twitched. Perhaps it was because he had changed the world too much, but Wang Chong realized that the 3 great training camps were completely different from what he remembered. In the past, the 3 great training camps didn't attract so much attention. The first time it was opened, it didn't attract so many scions of nobles and nobles either. Furthermore, the number of people recruited by the 3 great training camps was much higher than in his previous life. Looks like everything is different now. Wang Chong thought. Changing the world recklessly wasn't without a price. This price wasn't just reflected in the world constraint, it was reflected in other things as well. Wang Chong couldn't tell whether this change was good or bad. But regardless of whether it was good or bad, he had no choice. No matter what, at the very least, the 3 great training camps haven't changed. With this thought in mind, Wang Chong, Wei Hao, Zhao Jingdian, and the others headed for the east gate. In just a moment, they were already on the official road and galloping away. Many news regarding the 3 great training camps had already been released. The establishment of the training camps was proposed by the Holy Emperor and approved by the Bureau of Military Personnel, Bureau of Punishments, Bureau of Works, Bureau of Revenue, and Bureau of Personnel. With the cooperation of the Imperial Army, the 3 camps of Longwei, Shenwei, and Kunwu were set up. The camps would be set up on the east, west, and north sides of the capital, in a mountain range 20 li away. The distance was neither too far nor too short. If it was too far away, the three great training camps would easily lose their protection. It would not be safe enough. And if they were too close, they would all be heading toward the capital, and training would be impossible. The Kunwa training camp that Wang Chong and the others had chosen was in the mountains in the east. They followed the official road to the east and then entered a small path. After about 6 hours, Wang Chong and the others finally saw a huge mountain range. It towered into the clouds, like a prehistoric giant beast standing in the middle of the mountains. The peak of the mountain was not covered with lush trees, but with wooden palaces, buildings, and training grounds. Hundreds and thousands of banners that symbolized the Tang dynasty were scattered all over the mountains, fluttering in the wind. The largest, thickest, and tallest yellow banner was at least 100 meters tall, and the two golden-red characters on it fluttered in the wind. Even from a distance, Wang Chong could still see the two characters. Great Emperor. Kunwu. What an imposing sight. Seated on the back of a horse, Wei Hao gazed into the distance with an exaggerated expression. The others didn't finish their words, but the sight before them had left their hearts trembling. Of the three great training camps, Kunwu was meant for the commoners. If even Kunwu had such an imposing sight, it was easy to imagine how Shenwei and Longwei would fare. The royal court dispatched the Bureau of Military Personnel, Bureau of Punishments, Bureau of Revenue, and the Imperial Army to work together. The results are indeed extraordinary. Wang Chong thought as he gazed into the distance. In his previous life, Wang Chong had no fate with the three great training camps. Besides, the three great training camps weren't a place that ordinary people could approach. As such, this was the first time Wang Chong was seeing the Kunwa training camp. Even though they were both in terms of construction, his spirit vein probably started earlier than the three great training camps. However, in terms of scale, it was truly a far cry from the Kunwa training camp. Wei Hao, don't get careless when we reach the mountain. Kunwa training camp is one of the weakest of the three great training camps. However, if you think that you are invincible in there and that you will surely be able to enter the training camp, I'm afraid that you'll have to wait until the second batch opens. Wang Chong suddenly said to Wei Hao. The Kunwa training camp was just ahead, and his brothers were right beside him. There were some things that Wang Chong had to inform them in advance. You must be joking. I am an Origin Energy Tier 7 expert, and I have already cultivated the mountain ascension formula that you gave me. Is everyone in the Kunwa training camp at Origin Energy Tier 8? Wei Hao let out a strange cry, clearly not believing it. His cultivation had risen significantly, and for some reason, the mountain ascension formula that Wang Chong gave him was exceptionally suited for him. It was as though it was tailor-made for him. It was precisely because of this that his confidence soared, and why so many disciples of the aristocratic families surrounded him and followed his lead. Yet, Wang Chong said that he might not be able to enter the Kunwa training camp. There was no way Wei Hao would believe it. Humph, is that so? Do you think that the path of martial arts is just a clash of strength? You might be strong, but your movement technique is lacking and you aren't agile enough. You might be able to deal with ordinary people, but against true experts, they will be able to see through your flaws in just a few moves. Most of the students in the Kunwa training camp come from ordinary families, and they don't have the same background as you and me. However, this is precisely the reason why they have to put in so much more effort and hardship than you and me. Besides, the Kunwa training camp targets commoners. However, this is also the reason why the competition they face is far more intense than you and I can imagine. Those who are able to obtain the qualifications to enter the Kunwa training camp have all emerged from thousands of people or through intense competition among their respective clans. These people are the cream of the crop. Just based on how they were able to stand out from so many people. Do you think that they can't see through your flaws? Wang Chong's words moved the crowd. Mayase Mayaka didn't expect the Kunwa training camp to have so many tricks up its sleeves. On the other hand, Li Zhuxin's eyes were filled with astonishment. It wasn't surprising for the commoners to compete intensely with one another, but given that Wang Chong was born into a family of ministers and generals, it was rare for him to know of such a thing. It can't be. On the other hand, Wei Hao didn't think too much about it. That's too exaggerated. Wang Chong didn't explain much. Given his capability, he could choose any of the 3 great training camps. The reason why he chose the Kunwa training camp wasn't because he was impulsive or because he was bored of it. Rather, it was out of deep consideration. Shenwei and Longwei were renowned and powerful training camps, and the people in them were either influential or influential clans. However, it would be proven in the future that Kunwa was the place with the most experts and talents. In the future, more than 90% of the rising generals of the Tang dynasty would come from here. This wouldn't change just because he changed the course of history. The children of the poor matured early. The nature of the Kunwa training camp made it the most outstanding among the 3 great training camps. What Wang Chong said to Wei Hao just now wasn't fabricated. It was the correct evaluation of the students of the Kunwa training camp in the future. These people had no background and limited resources. The only thing they could rely on was their hard work. Wei Hao's hard work was already considered to be very hard-working compared to his peers. But compared to these people, it was nothing. There were plenty of people who were crazier and more hard-working than him when it came to cultivation. What these people lacked wasn't aptitude, wisdom, or hard work, but cultivation resources. Thus, once they obtained sufficient resources in the Kunwa training camp, the instantaneous burst of energy would be astonishing. A single tree can't make a forest. If Wang Chong wanted to change the fate of the empire and wanted to find like-minded friends and subordinates, this was the best place. In any case, you have to remember this. If you meet someone who specializes in attacking your right lower back, use the Tiger Coiling Mountain and Dragon Coiling Mountain of the Mountain Coiling Force. Left Tiger, right Dragon. Remember this, and you won't fail miserably. Wang Chong came back to his senses and said. Got it. Wei Hao's face was full of lingering fear. Although he didn't dare to believe it, he knew that Wang Chong would never lie to him about this serious matter. Although there was still some distance to the Kunwa training camp, Wei Hao had begun to feel that this place was even more difficult to enter than the Shenwei and Longwei camps. Wang Chong had made it so clear. If he didn't be careful, he would really be an idiot. Also, when you get up the mountain, take a closer look. There's an instructor with a face full of wrinkles and a very fat body. Don't care about anything else, just find him. It'll be good for you in the future. Wang Chong said. The Kunwa training camp was divided into groups. Each group had a different instructor. Although it was to teach basic martial arts and provide guidance, it would be very useful in the future. The instructor Wang Chong mentioned was the best instructor in cross-training in the Kunwa training camp. He was very suitable for Wei Hao's mountain coiling force. The students taught by this instructor would be the valiant generals who would charge and break through enemy lines in the future. On the battlefield in the future, this instructor and the students he taught would be like thunder in the ears of the people. But now, because of his big belly, there were still many people paying attention to him. Many people were unwilling to join him and missed out on a lot of opportunities. If nothing unexpected happened, this instructor would be promoted to a higher rank in 3 years. Basically, he would not be able to teach any students anymore. If Wei Hao wanted to develop properly, this was the best opportunity. The future had changed. Wang Chong didn't know which group he was in now. He could only remind him in advance. Yes, Wang Chong. Don't worry. I understand. Seeing the seriousness in Wang Chong's words, Wei Hao's expression turned grim. This was a tacit understanding formed over a long period of time. Zhao Jingdian, follow me. Wang Chong turned around and faced Zhao Jingdian. They were good brothers for life. There was no need for Zhao Jingdian to find a special instructor. He was the best instructor for Wei Hao. Yes, Gongzi. Zhao Jingdian respectfully agreed without even thinking about it. Wang Chong was the son of Duke Jiu, the future successor of the Wang clan. Zhao Jingdian's grandfather had followed the Wang clan. In his heart, Zhao Jingdian had long treated Wang Chong as his future master. Di-da. Chapter 188. Gongzi, this is as far as we can send you. After traveling several li toward the Kunwu training camp, Li Zhuxin and Mayase Mayaka came to a halt. Their complexions weren't too good. Li Zhuxin's complexion was still fine, but Mayase Mayaka's was pale. There are too many experts on this mountain. Putting aside the true martial realm experts, there are quite a few profound martial realm experts as well. Ayaka and I won't be heading over. Their cultivation was far higher than Wang Chong, Wei Hao, Zhao Jingdian, and the others, so the pressure they felt was much greater. Wang Chong and the others were still fine, but the pressure seemed to be directed at them. In the entire Kunwu training camp, countless experts were gathered together, emanating intense hostility. This made Li Zhuxin, Mayase Mayaka, and the others feel terrible. Why don't I feel anything? Wei Hao looked to his left and right in astonishment. It's fine, you two can go first. Wang Chong raised his hand to stop Wei Hao before turning to Li Zhuxin and Mayase Mayaka. The words of the duo reminded Wang Chong of something. On the first day, the three great training camps had intentionally prevented the various clans from bringing their servants and personal experts into the training camp. There were top-notch experts in the three great training camps, and they were able to discern the difference in auras from afar. If Wang Chong's guess was right, Li Zhuxin and the others should have been suppressed by this technique. To be able to gather all the Imperial Army members in the training camp and fuse their auras into a single mountain, it was likely that they were experts from the royal family. To possess such a technique, it was almost certain that they were experts from the royal family. With such experts around, it was impossible for Li Zhuxin, Mayase Mayaka, and the others to follow them in. Mayase Mayaka, help me keep an eye on my cousin. If anyone tries to harm him, get rid of them discreetly. Help him until he is safely out to sea. Mr. Li, help me send Zhang Monyan off. Since the three great training camps needed these two top-notch experts for the time being, Wang Chong decided to send them out. Yes, Gongzi. The two of them quickly turned their steeds around and left together with Shen Hai, Meng Long, and the others. Only Wang Chong, Zhao Jingdian, Wei Hao, and the others were left to attack the Kunwu training camp. At the foot of the mountain, several huge tents were erected. Above the tents, military flags were fluttering in the wind. The words, Kunwu, were written on the flags, completely in the style of a military camp. Wang Chong, Wei Hao, Zhao Jingdian, and a few other scions handed in their tokens to participate in the Kunwu training camp, and they successfully passed the test, heading up the mountain. The Kunwu training camp had chosen the highest mountains within a radius of nearly 100 miles. Walking on such mountains, everyone would feel as small as an ant. From the foot of the mountain to the peak, there were countless tents, layer by layer, like a flight of stairs. Around these tents, there were black-armored heavy-tier experts standing guard. There were already many people on the mountain. Wang Chong led the pony up the mountain. Weird, why are there so many scions here? Looking at the mountain, Wang Chong suddenly frowned. The Kunwu training camp was filled with commoners. However, for some reason, Wang Chong noticed that there were quite a few scions on the mountain. They were dressed in luxurious clothes, and with a single look, it was clear that they weren't from ordinary families. Furthermore, there were quite a few of them. Logically speaking, these scions should be at Shenwei and Longwei. Why would they appear here? Could it be that it was caused by him changing his fate? Wang Chong was perplexed. Before Wei Hao could say anything, the scions of the aristocratic families beside him wanted to say something but hesitated. They all had strange expressions on their faces. "Gongzi, do you really not know?" one of the scions asked with a perplexed expression. "What do you mean?" Wang Chong was even more perplexed. The situation in the Kunwa training camp was obviously different from what he remembered. For Wang Chong, this was something that he should pay attention to. Wang Chong was just asking casually. He didn't expect Wei Hao and the others to answer him. Unexpectedly, Wei Hao didn't say anything, but his followers seemed to know the answer. "Haha, Wang Chong, it seems that you really don't care about what's going on outside the window. Let me ask you, of the three major training camps, Shenwei, Longwei, and Kunwu, do you know which one is the most popular?" Wei Hao couldn't help but laugh when he heard Wang Chong's question. "Of course it's Shenwei and Longwei. What else is there to ask?" Wang Chong asked in surprise. "Could there be some problem here?" "Haha, you really don't know. Let me tell you, the most popular one is not Shenwei or Longwei, but Kunwu." "How is that possible?" Wang Chong was completely dumbfounded. What was going on? Wei Hao had confused him. But judging from Wei Hao's expression, it didn't seem like he was lying. This made Wang Chong even more confused. Why? Wang Chong was surprised. Could it be that time and space had changed, and everything was different from before? Gongzi doesn't know. "It's all because of you." One of the scions finally couldn't hold it in anymore. "Because of me?" Wang Chong was dumbfounded. He couldn't react at all. Hee, don't say any more. He really doesn't know anything. As Wei Hao spoke, he turned around to look at Wang Chong with a sinister smile. "Wang Chong, you're probably the only one who doesn't know about this matter. Do you know who everyone is most concerned about in regards to the three major training camps? Hee, it's none other than you. When you were still in the imperial prison, everyone was secretly trying to find out which of the three major training camps you would choose. I happen to know a little about it, so I helped you spread it out. Now, everyone says that you are the most popular among all the Han people in the Tang dynasty. As long as they follow you, they'll definitely live a good life under any general, and their promotion won't be too slow. I've already followed you to Kunwu. Can't you see such an obvious thing?" Wei Hao smiled complacently. "The Kunwu training camp is the worst among the three major training camps, but now it's the most popular because of you. We came to Kunwu training camp not only because of Gongzi Wei, but also because of you. If not for this reason, even if we wanted to join the Kunwa training camp, our families wouldn't have agreed," said a descendant of an aristocratic family who followed Wei Hao. "So it's because of the regional commander's incident?" Wang Chong fell silent. Only now did he realize that he might have underestimated the impact of this incident. It was only 2 days ago that he was released from the imperial prison. It was too close, and the lingering effect was still lingering. No wonder the three major training camps were affected. Although he was surprised, it might be a good thing for his plan. "Huh. Strange, why are there girls in the training camp?" After climbing for several hundred meters, Wei Hao suddenly shouted as if he had discovered something. "Is that so? The training camp is divided into 4 camps, Azure Dragon, White Tiger, Vermilion Bird, and Black Tortoise. It's not strange for there to be girls here. They should be from the Vermilion Bird camp." Wang Chong smiled. Although he didn't know much about them, he knew that Shenwei, Longwei, and Kunwu training camps were divided into 4 smaller camps, Azure Dragon, White Tiger, Vermilion Bird, and Black Tortoise. Moreover, it was different from the past. The 3 great training camps were recruiting girls. This was a pioneering move. That was why it attracted so much attention. Wang Chong wasn't surprised by Wei Hao's words at all. In the Kunwu training camp, the tents blocked Wang Chong's view, so he had to take a detour. However, upon seeing the few girls that Wei Hao spoke of, Wang Chang's eyes narrowed and his expression warped, as though he was pricked by a needle. Wei Hao, Zhao Jingdian, don't speak. Lower your head and walk away. Lowering his head, Wang Chong pulled Zhao Jingdian along with him and walked down the mountain without turning back. Zhao Jingdian trusted Wang Chang's words, so he immediately turned around and left. However, Wei Hao was different. His confidence had soared, and there was nothing to be afraid of in the training camp. It wasn't as if he could eat anyone. Wang Chong, why are you running? As Wei Hao spoke, he walked towards a few beautiful figures standing by the side of the road, muttering, I'm going to kill them. He muttered, look, they seem to be waiting for someone. Whine. At this moment, the snow-white ears of one of the ladies twitched. As though she had heard something, she abruptly turned her head around. Before Wang Chong could walk half a meter away, he heard a sharp reprimand from the side of the mountain. Wang Chong, how dare you run? Wang Chong, you two know each other. Wei Hao's eyes lit up. His interest was piqued. Leaving his two followers behind, he jogged toward the few beautiful and valiant-looking women in white by the side of the road. Bastard! Wei Hao, that bastard! He can't move at the sight of women. Wang Chong also heard the commotion behind him and cursed in his heart. That fool, youngster Wei, had a bad habit ever since he was young. He couldn't move at the sight of beautiful women. It wasn't that he had any ill intentions, but he just couldn't resist the temptation of beautiful women. Guan Jian, you brat, you should know where you're at as well. Can't you see the aura of a queen exuding from those ladies? And you're even running toward them. Wang Chong, you're still trying to run. Don't blame us for being impolite. All of a sudden, that voice sounded for the second time. It was as cold as ice, and there was a hint of warning in it. From afar, Wei Hao's voice could be heard. Sisters, so you're waiting for Wang Chong. Call me Wei Hao. Io. Boom. At the side of the mountain, a shrill cry rang out, followed by an earth-shattering boom. At this moment, the entire mountain seemed to tremble violently, and dust billowed into the sky. The commotion at the side of the mountain instantly attracted the attention of countless people. Many pairs of eyes looked over from all directions. Wang Chong abruptly turned around, only to see a valiant figure standing at the side of the mountain. Her hair was fluttering in the wind, and her eyes were cold. She was glaring at him coldly, and there was a strong warning in her eyes. On the other hand, Wei Hao, who had cultivated the mountain ascension formula and had just reached origin energy tier 7, was currently in the midst of a surge in his strength and confidence. As though a toad struck by lightning, his limbs were spread wide open as he was stepped firmly beneath her feet. The mountain ascension formula that Wang Chong had imparted to him made it so that there were few who could match him in the same cultivation realm. Yet, under this lady's slender legs, he couldn't even withstand a single kick. Marchioness E. Chapter 189. Wang Chong, if you take another step forward, there will be one less fatty in this world. The valiant figure said coldly as she exerted a little more force on her leg, and Wei Hao immediately started screaming. Wang Chong, save me. No matter how slow Wei Hao's reaction was, he could tell that these valiant beauties were here for Wang Chong. Every single one of them was beautiful, but who knew how they could possess such strength? Wei Hao's origin energy tier 7 cultivation coupled with his coiling might made it impossible for him to move at all. He tried exerting his strength a few times, but he ended up being pinned to the ground like a toad. The disparity in strength was simply too great. He didn't stand a chance at all. It was no wonder why Wang Chong turned around and left without saying a single word upon seeing the beautiful lady. He regretted not listening to him. At this moment, Wei Hao was lying on the ground like a toad. His intestines were green with regret. The other party had grasped the relationship between Wang Chong and Wei Hao, so Wang Chong could only turn his head around. His body stiffened, he slowly made his way up the mountain. It was a short distance, but to Wang Chong, it felt as long as a million li, he. Before Wang Chong could say anything, the other two valiant beauties standing by the side of the road couldn't help but burst into laughter upon seeing Wang Chong's stiff body. Marchioness E. Wang Chong looked at the young lady who seemed to be around 18 to 19 years old and called out softly. Wang. Wei Hao, who was still struggling on the ground a moment ago, suddenly felt as though he was struck by lightning. His face paled, and great fear surfaced in his eyes. Marchioness E. You said that she's the Marchioness E who is together with your cousin. Wei Hao suddenly exclaimed with an uneasy expression. Didn't I say that you shouldn't go? You just wouldn't listen. Wang Chong grumbled. How would I know that you're talking about this demoness, damn fatty, what are you saying? Who's the demoness? If your tongue is too long, you won't live long. Do you want to die? A very uncomfortable voice threatened. Don't. Big sis, that's not what I meant. I'm not talking about you. Ouch. Before Wei Hao could finish his words, he suddenly let out a strange cry and was kicked into the air like a huge cannonball. Young Master Wei, young Master Wei. Little Duke. Young Duke. The expressions of Wei Hao's lackeys changed drastically. They ran over as if their butts were on fire. What are you doing? Zhao Jingdian felt an immense threat from the tyrannical woman before him, and he immediately moved to stand in front of Wang Chong. Humph. Do you have the right to speak here? Even Wang Chong was unable to react in time. Pang. Zhao Jingdian was sent flying several dozen zhang away at a speed that was beyond Fei's imagination. Before this frosty woman, Zhao Jingdian was powerless to resist. However, Zhao Jingdian came from a prestigious clan after all. Even though his cultivation was lacking, he was able to react swiftly. After being sent flying several dozen zhang, he twisted his body in midair and forcefully stabilized his body. Pang, he landed on the ground and staggered a few steps back, but he didn't fall. Humph, I didn't expect you to be capable. The frosty woman finally turned her head and glanced straight at Zhao Jingdian. You. Zhao Jingdian wasn't one to back down. After taking 2 steps forward, he immediately stopped and a trickle of blood seeped out from the corner of his lips. Clearly, he was injured from that palm strike. He wasn't as unharmed as he looked on the surface. Jingdian, stop. Seeing that Zhao Jingdian was still unwilling to back down and was about to make a move, Wang Chong hurriedly stopped him. Even though the woman before him looked young, her strength was on par with his second sister, Wang Zhuyan. If one thought that she was weak because she was a woman, then they were gravely mistaken. The kick that Wei Hao suffered and the palm that Zhao Jingdian suffered was already a sign of her going easy on them. Otherwise, if she were to use her full strength, it would be a miracle if the both of them were still standing. Wei Hao isn't injured. Wang Chong said. What? Zhao Jingdian was taken aback. Turning around, he saw 3 figures heading up the mountain. Wang Chong, I remember now. The examination for the training camp is more important. I won't be accompanying you then. You two can chat first. Wei Hao's voice sounded from afar. You must be joking. That woman was Marchioness E, the demoness who often hung out with Wang Chong's second sister. She was a true vicious person. Even though Wei Hao had never met her before, he had heard of her glorious deeds from Wang Chong. If only he knew that it was her, he wouldn't have come to the training camp today. This time, he had bumped into the muzzle of her gun. He had eyes but failed to see. Gongzi. Do we need to be so afraid of her? Wei Hao's 2 lackeys were indignant. Heh, what do you know? It's not that I'm not loyal. There are a few people in Suzhou City that you can't afford to offend. One of them is his second sister, and the other is that Marchioness E. Even if it's here, if I were anywhere else, I would still run away the moment I hear that it's them. Wei Hao ran away boldly and spoke with confidence. Wei Hao was well aware of how vicious Wang Chong's second sister was. Back then, when Wang Chong was being taught a lesson by his second sister, he still wanted to help him out of loyalty. In the end, he ended up being taught a lesson by that person. Before that person, the title of Duke of Wei was useless. Birds of a feather flock together. How could someone who could get along well with Wang Chong's second sister be any ordinary person? That person was one of the few who could knead Wang Chong like a ball of dough, just like Wang Chong's second sister. If he didn't run away now, he would really be a fool. Wang Chong, I'm willing to climb a mountain of swords and dive into a sea of flames with you. You better pray for yourself on this matter. Wei Hao observed a moment of silence for Wang Chong before running even faster. Looks like you've made a bad friend. Marchioness Yi said coldly. Behind her, the two valiant ladies laughed even louder. It could be said that they had watched Wang Chong grow up together with his second sister. Looking at Wang Chong and his scoundrel friends, they couldn't help but find it hilarious. That's right. What a disloyal fellow. Wang Chong nodded his head obediently. If only I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have saved him. Humph. Seeing Wang Chong's good attitude, Marchioness Yi harumphed coldly and let the matter rest. Wang Chong, you've grown capable now. You don't even have any respect for us anymore. Marchioness Yi suddenly said in dissatisfaction. Big sisters, what are you saying? Wang Chong cried out in indignation. He was 15 this year, and the youngest among them was already 19. They were at least 4 years older than him. It wasn't wrong for him to call them big sisters. Humph, you still refuse to admit it? Let me ask you, why didn't you come over when I called you over? Marchioness Yi's face was as cold as ice. Aren't I here now? He, that's not what your big sister Yi is talking about. Think about it carefully. Did you stand Marchioness Yi up when she invited you over? Seeing Wang Chong's awkward expression, the two valiant ladies by the side burst into laughter. Stood me up. Wang Chong was taken aback. This time, it wasn't an act. Wang Chong was truly confused. He didn't remember such a thing happening. He had been hiding from her all this while, not even meeting her. If such a thing really happened, there was no way he wouldn't remember it. Humph, do you need me to remind you? 3 months ago, I had your second sister, Wang Zhuyan, invite you over. Marchioness Yi placed her hands on her waist and reminded him. What? My second sister said that she would bring me to a place to meet some people. So it's you guys. Wang Chong finally recalled what was going on. However, it was precisely because he had figured it out that he was even more shocked. He finally understood why Marchioness Yi was waiting for him along the way. 3 months ago, during Wang Chong's grandfather's birthday, his second sister acted mysteriously, saying that she would bring him to meet some people after the event. But due to the large number of guests that day, the matter was left unsettled. Back then, Wang Chong was perplexed. In the end, it turned out that Marchioness Yi and the others were the ones who invited him over. Yet, his second sister must have forgotten to tell them about it. Marchioness Yi must have thought that he stood her up by not replying to her. It was no wonder why she would bring her men to block the Kunwa training camp. Coming to a realization, Wang Chong couldn't help but chuckle bitterly inside. How could I dare? Isn't that my grandfather's birthday? With a bitter smile, Wang Chong hurriedly recounted the entire matter. Seeing Wang Chong's reaction, the two valiant ladies behind Marchioness Yi couldn't help but chuckle. Alright, Sister Yi, stop teasing him. What are you talking about? I think it's fun. Zhu Yan has such a fun younger brother at home, but she doesn't bring him out to play. Wang Chong could only fall silent. Those who could hang out with second sister and get along well with each other were definitely not normal women. It was impossible for him to defeat them. None of these women were weaklings. At the very least, they were all at true martial realm. If he were to charge forward and use force on them, Wei Hao and Zhao Jingdian would be the best outcome. Besides, a gentleman doesn't fight with a lady. Even if he won, it wouldn't be an honorable victory. Zhao Jingdian's complexion was also bizarre as he listened to the conversation. Wang Chong had stirred up many storms in the royal court, and he was a highly regarded existence in the empire. However, in front of these crazy women, he was completely unable to display it. It was as if he was being restrained. This was also the first time he was seeing the women in Wang Chong's life. Humph, at least you're sensible. I won't tease you anymore. Marchioness Yi retracted her slender right leg and sheathed the whip on her waist. Her posture was valiant, reminiscent of a heroine. I'm here to warn you. In the capital, the Black Qilin, Zhou Zhang, has already announced that the 3 great training camps will be opening. As soon as you enter the training camps, I'll teach you a lesson. You should know what kind of person Zhou Zhang is. Be careful. He probably wouldn't dare to cause trouble in the training camps, but it's hard to say the same outside. Besides, it's hard to say if he doesn't do anything. Marchioness Yi warned. Zhou Zhang. Upon hearing that name, Wang Chong's face immediately warped. Zhou Zhang. Who is Zhou Zhang? Zhao Jingdian walked over and asked in astonishment. Judging from the expressions of these people, Zhou Zhang seemed to be a formidable figure. However, Zhao Jingdian had never heard of him before. I'll tell you later. Wang Chong stopped Zhao Jingdian. Looking at Marchioness Yi before him, a grave expression flashed across his eyes. Why does Zhou Zhang want to deal with me? I don't think there's any grudge between us, right? Humph, you've forgotten. Imperial censor Zhou Jie is his second uncle. 3 months ago, during the royal court gathering, Zhou Jie was publicly slapped by the old imperial censor he ties several times because of you. He had lost all his face in front of so many officials. I heard that when Zhou Jie returned, he nearly committed suicide. His father passed away early, and Zhou Jie has been treating him well ever since he was young. Do you think that he wouldn't teach you a lesson if you're Zhou Zhang? Chapter 190. After saying those words, Marchioness Yi left. Only Wang Chong was left in deep thought. Young master, who is that Zhou Zhang? Zhao Jingdian asked. He couldn't understand what Zhou Zhang was talking about. He only felt that Zhou Zhang was formidable, but he couldn't understand why. Zhou Zhang is the head of the capital's 9 gongzi, of the same generation as my second brother. He crossed blows with my second brother before, and they ended in a draw. Wang Chong said. Ah! Zhao Jingdian couldn't help but exclaim. Even though he didn't know who Zhou Zhang was, Wang Chong's second brother, Wang Bei, did. In the Wang clan, Wang Bei was once viewed as one of the most likely candidates to inherit Duke Jiu's legacy. Be it in terms of talent or martial arts, Wang Chong's second brother was an outstanding candidate. In the capital, Wang Bei's name resounded like thunder. Even the Yao clan's gongzi, Yao Feng, was taught a lesson by him. Otherwise, he wouldn't have vented his anger on Wang Chong, sending a hoodlum, Ma Zhou, to frame him. Wang Bei was an existence who could do whatever he wanted in the capital, and it was publicly acknowledged that he had a bright future ahead of him. Regardless of whether it was the scions of nobles, or prestigious clans, no one dared to provoke him. If he didn't suffer from the berserker syndrome. Wang Chong lowered his head silently. He knew far more about Zhou Zhang than what he had told Zhao Jingdian. Zhou Zhang might look honest, but he was actually a vicious person. Furthermore, he possessed incredible talent and strength. Second sister Wang Zhuyan and Marchioness Yi were already extremely powerful in the capital. But compared to Zhou Zhang, they were still lacking. They weren't on the same level. Not only so, even though Zhou Zhang didn't seem to have any background, there were rumors that he had been adopted by King Qi. Zhou Zhang had never admitted to this matter, but he didn't deny it either. However, there was no doubt that Zhou Zhang could enter the King Qi residence freely. On top of that, King Qi treated him exceptionally well. At the very least, Zhou Zhang's martial arts were imparted to him by King Qi. If not for that, given Marchioness Yi's background, she wouldn't have been so fearful of him. Someone who was on par with his second brother, Wang Bei, was definitely no ordinary person. By the way, young master. Where did that girl come from? Marquis Yi. How old was she to be conferred the title of Marquis? Does our Tang dynasty have such a young Marquis? And it's a woman. Zhao Jingdian rubbed his chest where Marchioness Yi had injured him. Ha, Jingdian, you weren't in the capital before, so you don't know. This is little Marchioness Yi, the daughter of Marchioness Yi. Among the nobles, Marchioness Yi was the only female marquis, and she was the only one whose title could be inherited. Back then, great ancestor Gao had decreed that as long as the Tang dynasty existed, Marchioness Yi's position would be passed down from generation to generation. He also passed down the alchemy book Iron Voucher as proof. Thus, even though she's little Marchioness Yi, everyone still calls her Marchioness Yi. Because her position was almost set in stone. From the moment she was born, she was destined. Wang Chong smiled. In the Tang dynasty, the hereditary titles were basically all at the level of a duke. Furthermore, they were the descendants of those who followed great ancestor Gao to establish the Tang dynasty. Nobles were not qualified to be hereditary. In the Tang dynasty, Marchioness Yi was the only one who could inherit the title of Marquis. I see. Zhao Jingdian nodded in realization. Wang Chong smiled and didn't say anything else. Wang Chong didn't expect Marchioness Yi to appear in the Kunwa training camp. At the very least, it didn't happen in his previous life. In this life, many things had begun to change. But no matter what, Marchioness Yi joining the Kunwa training camp was definitely beneficial to him. Furthermore, Marchioness Yi's appearance also reminded Wang Chong of something. The establishment of the 3 great training camps was a major event in the history of the Tang dynasty. He wasn't the only one who was interested in it. Experts of Marchioness Yi's caliber were also interested in it. Let's go. We'll head up the mountain to take a look. There's a limit to the number of people in the 3 great training camps. If we go too late, we might really be eliminated. Wang Chong beckoned Zhao Jingdian over, and the two of them headed up the mountain. The Kunwa training camp was astonishingly huge. Based on the surface area of the mountain, it probably covered more than 100 square meters. The entire mountain was filled with tents and people. The first day was the most bustling. Let's go. Let's clear the first test first. Wang Chong said. There were many Imperial Army soldiers stationed on the mountain, and there were many primary selection tests set up in the areas guarded by the Imperial Army. To enter the Kunwa training camp, there was a basic requirement for one's cultivation and strength. This was known as the basic requirement. If one couldn't even meet the basic requirements, there was no need for him to participate in the subsequent tests. The primary selection test was divided into 3 parts. The first part was to test one's strength. One had to lift a huge boulder. Those who couldn't lift it would be filtered out. The second part was to test one's fists. In order to pass this test, one had to know a set of fist arts. This was the most basic requirement. The third part was slightly more profound, and it was a requirement for a fighter to deal with it. I just have to withstand 3 punches. Amidst the crowd, Wang Chong easily passed the first 2 tests and stood before the last examiner. Yes. As long as you can dodge 3 punches from me, you will be able to pass this test. The man who spoke was in his 20s. His face was expressionless, and he didn't seem to be an Imperial Army soldier. Instead, he seemed to be someone hired by the royal court to be in charge of this test. I understand. Wang Chong smiled. This test was to test one's agility. I'm ready. The moment the man spoke, he suddenly punched out. Boom! Raging winds howled. At the instant the man punched out, a metal fist appeared before him. It was just a hair's breadth away from his face. The surroundings were silent. Everyone stared at Wang Chong, dumbfounded. On the other hand, the man's face was pale, and his expression was incredibly awful. Please go ahead. You have passed the primary selection test. There are no more questions. Please proceed up the mountain. With a reddened face, the man bowed and obediently retreated to the side. Thank you for going easy on me. Wang Chong flung his robe, and with a smile, he walked out of the crowd. If it was in the past, it would have been difficult for him to clear a test of this level. At the very least, he would have had to spend some time on it. However, that was then, and this was now. After several months of hard work, this primary selection test was no longer difficult for him. Even though Wang Chong hadn't cultivated any speed-type or agility-type cultivation technique, his serpentine dragon root bone granted him speed, endurance, reflexes, and agility far surpassing that of an ordinary human. With just the speed of his movements, he could easily clear a test of this level. Turning around, Zhang Xian saw that Zhao Jingdian was still queuing up for the test. Wang Chong glanced at him, and without any hesitation, he headed up the mountain. Now that he had cleared the primary selection test, the next step was the most important one. The selection of instructors. There was a limit to the number of people who could enter the Kunwa training camp. At the peak of the mountain, the instructors stationed by the royal court held the life and death of everyone. Every instructor could only take in a certain number of students, and once they reached their quota, they wouldn't accept any more. By the time all of the instructors were filled, the recruitment for this batch of Kunwa training camp would be over. There was a certain technique to joining the Kunwa training camp. Most people would simply pick an instructor and head up the mountain. Little did they know that the selection of instructors was the most important part of the Kunwa training camp, as well as the most crucial part. Different instructors had different styles. Some specialized in charging through enemy lines, some specialized in killing on the battlefield, some specialized in one-on-one combat, and some specialized in cavalry charging. Many people didn't know that the instructors of the three great training camps were elites handpicked from the various battlefields, and they possessed rich combat experience. It was only many years later when certain things were revealed that the students of the three great training camps finally understood the significance of these instructors. Choosing the right examiner would be as beneficial to one's future as a top-notch cultivation technique. This was also the reason why Wang Chong asked Wei Hao to look for the fat instructor. Wei Hao's mountain ascension force, coupled with the fat instructor's extremely ferocious charging through enemy lines, would be able to unleash the greatest power. Wang Chong was also looking for an instructor that was suitable for him. The Kunwa training camp is already different from what I remember. I wonder if that instructor is still around. Wang Chong thought to himself. There was actually a knack for choosing an instructor. There were all kinds of instructors in the three great training camps. However, the instructor Wang Chong was looking for was a very special one. He didn't teach charging through enemy lines, nor did he teach invincibility of cavalry, nor did he teach physical combat. This instructor taught the highest level of art of commanding. In other words, this instructor was the hidden hero among all the instructors. Other than Wang Chong, there was probably no one on the mountain who knew of this. In Wang Chong's impression, this instructor was rather low-key. Moreover, he would only teach for 3 years. After 3 years, there would no longer be anyone teaching this type of art in the Kunwa training camp. When that instructor's identity was exposed, many people in the Kunwa training camp regretted it bitterly. However, despite keeping a low profile, it was not easy to join this instructor's team. Among all the instructors, this instructor had the highest requirements when it came to recruiting students. Many students who passed the test of other instructors were rejected by him. This was also considered a hidden requirement. However, the reason why Wang Chong wanted to join his team was not because of the art of commanding. It was because among all the instructors in the Kunwa training camp, this instructor had the highest authority. In the 3 great training camps, there were a few lost skills that could only be learned through him. Not only that, the 3 great training camps had strict rules. Once you joined the camp, you had to attend all the training, morning exercises, and homework. This was the same for all the instructors. For others, this rule might not mean much. However, Wang Chong was different. The difference was that neither the great yin-yang heaven creation art or the art of God and demon obliteration could be taught here. Wang Chong's level had long surpassed this level. Wang Chong didn't want to be restricted too much. Among all the instructors, only that instructor was the most lax. As long as one could pass his test, there was no need to attend morning exercises, training, or daily homework. There were no restrictions at all. Chapter 191. There were many people on the mountain, including the examinees and the Imperial Army soldiers stationed on the mountain. It wasn't easy to find the instructor he was looking for in a short period of time. Fool! Didn't you hear what I said? Just as he was searching for the hidden instructor, Wang Chong suddenly heard a low and tyrannical voice coming from the crowd. But Gongzi, this is my only chance, Wang Chong heard another person pleading bitterly. Humph. I don't care if this is your only chance or not. Don't forget, your father is my father's subordinate. If you dare to disobey me, your father can just wait to go home and farm. By then, your entire family can just wait to starve. That fellow is very strong. You had better remember this. No matter what, even if you die, you have to severely injure him. I know your capabilities. You can definitely do it. The voice that Wang Chong heard previously threatened fiercely. Humph. Bullying the weak again. It's one thing if it's anywhere else, but you dare to do it in the 3 great training camps? You sure are gutsy. Wang Chong sneered coldly. He had already understood what was going on. He had long heard that some people in the 3 great training camps would make use of their family's influence to force others to do something during the instructor's examination so as to gain an unfair advantage for themselves. As their methods were discreet and didn't break the rules, not even the instructors could do anything about it. However, this was the first time Wang Chong had encountered such a thing since he entered the Kunwa training camp. With a thought, Wang Chong quickly turned around and walked toward the source of the voice. Kunwa training camp was filled with people, but not many noticed them. Through the crowd, Wang Chong saw 3 proud figures standing there. Standing before them was a teenager dressed in simple clothes. He was kneeling on the ground, hugging one of the legs of one of the 3 and begging bitterly. He seemed to be filled with despair. At first glance, Wang Chong didn't pay much attention to him. However, when he saw the face, Wang Chong was stunned. How, is it him? Wang Chong stood there in a daze, suddenly recognizing who these people were. In the future, the Kunwa training camp would definitely be full of talented generals. The illustrious generals of the Tang dynasty would definitely dazzle the starry sky and illuminate the night sky of the Tang dynasty for a long time. This was the most glorious period of the Tang dynasty, and it would also be the last glorious period. When this light had illuminated the heavens, Wang Chong had still been one of the unsung commoners. Therefore, Wang Chong and them actually missed each other. The 2 sides did not have much interaction. In their era, he was still a nobody, but in his era, they had already fallen. This was the deepest regret in Wang Chong's heart. As the last Grand Marshal of the Tang dynasty, he did not have a capable general who could take charge of an area. This had always been a deep pain in Wang Chong's heart. It was precisely because of this that Wang Chong was finally unable to do it alone. He had been silently holding on for more than 10 years, but he was still defeated and killed. If history could be changed, he would have been able to rise to fame in that era of talented generals. If there were so many generals for him to command, perhaps everything would be different. Because of this, Wang Chong had a good understanding of the talented generals who came out of the three major training camps, especially those from the Kunwa training camp. Among the talented generals who came out of the Kunwa training camp, there was one person who was the most special. Because he was very good at surprise attacks. Among the countless talented generals of the Tang dynasty, there were very few generals with such a style. In the era when the entire Tang dynasty was in darkness and turmoil, the army he led used to make surprise attacks and breakthroughs under very unfavorable circumstances, creating opportunities for the army. In that era, many people had high hopes for him. But this person was like a comet. After a short burst of dazzling brilliance, he fell in a hurry. His weak martial arts became the fatal cause of his death. And an inappropriate order to break through became the direct cause of his death. And when it came down to it, it was because he had followed an inappropriate master. Regarding this matter, countless people sighed and lamented over it. Sun Jiming. A thought flashed across Wang Chong's mind as he looked at the kneeling examinee. To be able to forcefully order Sun Jiming to inflict heavy damage on a potential competitor to pave the way for him, this person should be Deng Mingxin. In other words, the person who would cause Sun Jiming's death in the future. To think that it would be them. It was one thing if Wang Chong didn't know about it, but if he didn't know, he couldn't just ignore it. If there were no accidents, this Sun Jiming would have failed the examination in the first batch due to Deng Mingxin. Most probably, it would only be the second batch that he entered the Kunwa training camp, and that would be half a year later. Even though it was just a difference of half a year, it could be a qualitative difference for a person. Many of the instructors who appeared in the first batch stopped teaching or guiding students in the second batch. Some of them were promoted, while others were completely focused on the first batch, unwilling to guide any more students. Furthermore, the first batch received a huge amount of attention and resources after the opening of the three great training camps. To those who truly wanted to enter the Kunwa training camp, the slightest difference could lead to a huge error. Not to mention, it would delay half a year of cultivation. Enough. Get up. As these thoughts flashed across Wang Chong's mind, a glint flashed across his eyes, and he immediately strode over. Sun Jiming, get up. There's no need to beg him. You're a man, so why should you be threatened by such a vile person? Wang Chong walked over, grabbed Sun Jiming's arm, and pulled him up from the ground. Sun Jiming stared blankly at the young man who had appeared out of nowhere. He had never seen this person before, and he couldn't understand why the other party would know his name. What's going on? Bastard, where did this scum come from? Why are you here to mess around? Who are you? This matter has nothing to do with you, so I advise you to stay out of our business and stay far away from here. That while Sun Jiming was still in a daze, Deng Mingxin and the others had already flown into a rage out of humiliation. The three of them were in the midst of teaching Sun Jiming a lesson when a tortoise suddenly appeared and interfered in their affairs. The three great training camps were extremely important to them, and anyone who dared to spoil their plans would be their mortal enemy. If I were you, I would leave right now. Deng Mingxin stepped forward and glared viciously at Wang Chong, not bothering to conceal his threat. Deng Mingxin, if I were you, I would scram right now. You can't afford to offend me. Wang Chong sneered coldly. Bastard, how can you speak to young Master Deng in such a manner? One of the lackeys couldn't hold himself back any longer and sent a fist flying toward Wang Chong. Hom long long. Dust billowed. No one could see how Wang Chong had made his move, but the lackey by Deng Mingxin's side was already smashed to the ground by Wang Chong's fist. The force was so great that the ground seemed to tremble for a moment. Not just Deng Mingxin, even the surrounding examinees were stunned by the sight. Only then did Sun Jiming react. He stared at Wang Chong in shock, realizing that the other party's background wasn't simple. Who in the world are you? Deng Mingxin's eyes narrowed as he flew into a rage out of humiliation. Guards, guards. Someone is fighting on the mountain, assaulting the examinees. Deng Mingxin's lackey reacted even faster and shouted toward the top of the mountain. On the first day of the training camp, anyone who dared to start a fight on the mountain would be met with the guards, and it was even possible for them to be stripped of their qualifications. Who are you? Don't you know that fighting is strictly prohibited here? The commotion on the mountain had already attracted the attention of several Imperial Army members. Like ferocious tigers descending from the mountain, they rushed over from all directions with disdain on their faces. Humph, it's him. I don't know what's wrong with him, but he suddenly attacked our men as though he had gone mad. Upon seeing the Imperial Army members arrive, one of Deng Mingxin's lackeys pointed at Wang Chong and sneered coldly. Deng Mingxin didn't say a word, but a gleeful glint flashed across his eyes. I've already told you to leave as soon as possible. But it's a pity that you didn't listen and insisted on meddling in other people's business. Deng Mingxin sneered coldly. Against a brute like Wang Chong, there was no need for him to make a move personally. As long as he played some tricks, regardless of whether Wang Chong made a move or not, he would be able to teach him a harsh lesson. Without such capabilities, how could he possibly control Sun Jiming and have him under his thumb? Is that so? I've already said that I'm not someone you can afford to offend. Wang Chong sneered coldly. Before the gazes of the crowd, before the Imperial Army members, he suddenly whipped out a token from his waist. Seeing the two simple words on the token, everyone's face paled in shock. The King of Song. This is the token of the King of Song. Exclamations of shock sounded in the surroundings. The arrogant Deng Mingxin and the others felt as though their eyes had been pricked by needles. Upon seeing the token, their faces immediately warped. I know who he is. He's Wang Chong. Heavens! He really came to the Kunwu training camp. A commotion broke out in the surroundings. Among the crowd, someone finally recognized Wang Chong's voice. And upon hearing Wang Chong's name, Deng Mingxin's heart sank to the bottom of a lake. He finally understood why the other party dared to be so nosy before him. However, it was better not to know than to not know. Deng Mingxin's heart felt heavy. So it's Wang Gongzi. Given Gongzi's reputation, it's unlikely that Gongzi made a move first. What's wrong with you all? To dare to make a move in the Kunwu training camp, do you still want to participate in the examination? Bring him away. How dare he make a move on Gongzi in the training camp? Strip him of his right to participate in the examination, that the voices of the Imperial Guards reached their ears, causing their expressions to turn ugly to the extreme. Before the crowd's eyes, the Imperial Army members were openly siding with Wang Chong. They picked up the unconscious examinee and dragged him down the mountain. Just like that, he was stripped of his right to participate in the examination. Gongzi. Beside Deng Mingxin, the follower's face was ashen and pale. Right, Gongzi, if you have the time, make a few more Wuxia steel swords. A single sword a month is too little. One of the Imperial Army members had already walked 10 zhang away when he suddenly turned around and spoke to Wang Chong passionately. In the Imperial Army, there was almost no one who didn't know of the Wuxia steel sword, regardless of whether it was internal or external. Especially after the commander of the Imperial Army bought Wang Chong's Death's Abyss, the reputation of the Wuxia steel sword had spread like wildfire in the Imperial Army. I understand. You're tuning into the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.